All right, hey guys, what is up? Here we are. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, joined by Jay, and we're back, but we're a bit late. Yeah, we're running late tonight, but it's all right.
My fault.
Yeah, Jay has been fined, and he's now got demerit points and strikes, and we have a very complicated system for this. There's a lots of penalties. It's very complex and intricate. Jay has like 6 red flags and 12 demerit points and 4 strikes. All that stuff. We use all that stuff. It's all
Pink
combined.
slips, yellow slips.
Yeah. So we'll round that off, and he'll be fined the appropriate percentage of his income, and we'll make it work. But yeah, I guess we missed last week, so it's good to be back. And as you can see, I'm not in my normal home. I'm in where I've been seen before, though there's new paint now. Somebody might notice that I'm at my parents' house much earlier than I usually am, but the COVID situation has caused them to strike early, which kind of got me dragged here somewhat against my will, but I guess it's not the worst thing in the world now that we're here. And while I'm here, I hope that we can keep things. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to get some shows done while we're here. So as we get towards Christmas, we will hopefully continue to be able to do some shows. And tonight's is the Royal Tenenbaums. So this is our second episode dedicated to a movie by filmmaker Wes Anderson. A couple years ago, we did Moonrise Kingdom. And this is a movie that I own. And I actually own, I think, a nice Criterion DVD of it. But I'm here, so I don't have it with me, so I can't show it off. But it's pretty cool. It has like a booklet and everything. So perhaps on a future show, I'll show it just for the hell of it. Although obviously anybody could look it up. And that's weird because I didn't buy it. Somebody gave it to me. Somebody who like owned it. I don't even remember why they owned it, because they weren't really the type of person that usually buys movies for themselves. So I don't even know what the story was there. Maybe somebody gave it to them. Maybe it's a re-gift situation. But anyway, I was very happy to get it because I really like this movie. When I was thinking about it, it's like one of my favorite movies of the 21st century for sure. I know we're only 19 years into the 21st century, almost 20, coming up on 20 years of 21st century. But yeah, 2001, that's the first official year of the 21st century. 2001 is like my favorite year in film. Now, I've thought about this before. There's other years where like the volume is bigger, where I can name more. But as far as absolute quality goes, it's 2001 for me, because you got this movie, which obviously people know I rank very high. Another movie that we were trying to do, but we couldn't find a watchable version. It's another one I own but don't have with me, which is kind of a lesser known anime. It's Metropolis, which is based on the old manga by Osamu Tezuka, which was one of his really old mangas that like ran in like the 40s and 50s. Anyway, in 2001, they made a movie adaptation of it, and it was kind of a big deal at the time, at least in anime circles, because it was directed by Rintaro. That's right, that's his one name. who was a pretty prominent anime director, and he'd done maybe most notably the 2 Galaxy Express movies, not Galaxy Express 999 and Adieu Galaxy Express, back at the late 70s, early 80s. And I just remember sometime in around 2000 or close to when that was going to be released, I remember I was in Ryan's basement. We were watching some movie that we'd rented. And I don't even know if it was anime, but it had a preview for this. And it was a big deal because it was like a really big budget anime. And also it was going to be based on, the god of manga, Osamu Tezuka's work. So anyway, that's one I really like a lot. And maybe we'll still be able to do it some. But that's also 2001. My favorite, another anime, which is probably either second place or tied for my favorite movie of all time, because my favorite movie of all time usually is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but right below it or sometimes next to it is the Studio Ghibli film Spirited Away, which is from 2001. What else is 2001? I think another movie we did on here, Donnie Darko, is 2001, and that's one I really, really like. But yeah, there's at least like 5 or 6 from. One of my favorite movies is the first of the Lord of the Rings movies, The Fellowship of the Ring. I adore that movie so much. So yeah, a lot of really, really good movies. Hannibal wouldn't really be that important, but I mean, it's not bad. But yeah, as I said, if I was naming maybe like a year like 86 or something like that, I could come up with more. But as far as like where they rank quality-wise, 2001 puts everything at the top, just because. Oh, that doesn't matter. But anyway, and this factors into it. This movie also factors into it because this is a movie I rank very highly. It's my second favorite Wes Anderson film after Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which is kind of like a companion movie to this, and that it shares a lot of things and a lot of cast members and stuff. And we can talk about that later as we go on. But what's funny is I don't really remember. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Another film in 2001 was Ocean's 11, which Danny Glover, Luke, and Owen Wilson turned down roles to do this movie instead.
That's interesting. Yeah, you could definitely see Luke and Owen Wilson as part of that crew. You could picture them in that movie. So that's interesting.
I feel like the Royal Tenenbaums is really when their career took off. I could be wrong about that, but I didn't really know they were before then. Like, I think so. I didn't watch Bottle Rocket when it came out.
No, me neither. There was Bottle Rocket and there was Rushmore. But this is the movie I think I would say is, this is where he finds his stride. It's kind of where he finds his definitive style and stride. It was his most successful movie at that point. And because of all the great actors involved and also kind of where they were in their careers at the time, like you said, it was kind of star making for them. Then you look at somebody like a Bill Murray, who is not a main character in this, but he's in this, is that Bill Murray was at kind of a low point in his career. A lot of the 90s had not been good for his stuff. Almost Frailty 2001? No, it can't be that old, is it? 2001? I think it's like 2003, 2004, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, or maybe that was in reference to something else that I missed.
I think that's what he was trying to say. Real quick.
2001. I like Frailty, but 2001. That old. Wow.
We should cover that one on here sometime. That's an interesting
I do like it. Although, again, it wouldn't factor into how I feel about 2001. I think it's a good movie. I think there's good movies from that year. I'm just saying the reason it's my favorite year in film is like there's a few. It's really front loaded for me.
Right.
Like a few of them are really high. They'd be like top 20 for me all time, regardless of any sort of stipulation.
Was that Spider-Man came out that year? Is that right?
Came out 2002. And it was an important movie, but I don't think it's a great movie. Like, it was important for the effect it had on sort of the superhero genre, and started to get some quality in there. I mean, people don't need to hear me blab about that trilogy. People have heard me say it enough on other shows, I'm sure, in bits and pieces. But an important movie. But yeah, that's 2002. But yeah, 2001. The main thing is Spirited Away, which is like super high. But then you've got Spirited Away, Metropolis, this movie, Fellowship of the Ring. Like, these are just huge movies. Donnie Darko is a little bit below them, but still also a really excellent movie that I love. But yeah, I'm surprised. Like, I usually, I can nail years of release dates, but I did not think Frailty was quite that old. I thought Frailty was a couple of years after that. That's interesting.
I thought this film was older than it was. For some reason, I thought it was 90s.
Yeah, but I what's funny is I don't actually remember the first time I saw this film. I didn't see it in theater. What's funny is like the first film I saw, like the first Wes Anderson film I saw in theater was Life Aquatic. And I went into that like not knowing very much about him or his career at that point, and I was just blown away. And then so it was probably in 2004 that I saw this movie. There's a good chance I saw Life Aquatic first and then sought this movie out. I'm not 100% on that because it's possible I saw it before him, but that seems likely. But as you said, it was interesting for where certain actors were in their career. But anyway, like I said, like Bill Murray, this was kind of help start his little renaissance that he had in the 2000s, even though it was a small role. Although then he got to, it's funny. We'll talk about each character and the role they play. But as far as Bill Murray goes in this, he's not a main character, but he's to the side. But he's also very much at this point in his career playing against type, right? Because he's playing a fairly flat, dull type of guy that doesn't have much charisma, which is like the opposite of like most Bill Murray characters. And if I'd seen this movie first, I was probably disappointed because I was like, oh, that's fine and all, but I want to see Bill Murray, used to his potential. And then I think that's what they did with Steve Zissou, which I've said before, but is my favorite Bill Murray role. I like it better than anything he's done. I love that character. That's one of my favorite characters in all of movies, period. I love that character so much.
You know what? I was looking today, and I haven't seen Life Aquatic. I haven't seen The Darjeeling Limited. I haven't seen Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is really good.
Yeah,
I also saw that in theater.
I need to watch all three of those.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the other one too, but it's funny I was reading an interview, and I'll probably bring some of it up as we do this show because I still have a window open about it. He actually talks about there's a really great sequence, I guess, where they're filming like going through the cars of a train. Sounds really interesting because the interviewer himself was shocked to find out they were like using a real train for it. He just figured that they were just using effects or something like that. But we'll get into that as we get into the technical aspects of this. I can't stand my lighting in this room.
Yeah, so much to dig into here. Where do we start?
Right, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Because, besides, as I said, I can't remember really the circumstances of the first time I saw the movie. All I can do is guess. My best guess is that shortly after seeing Life Aquatic, sometime in 2004, I probably sought this movie out. Although it is possible that maybe I saw pieces of it before that. It's not the type of movie that would have played on TV, so it's not like I would have seen it.
Right.
Although, did I have access to movie channels that early? Because there were certain times I did have, even that long ago, I sometimes had access to movie channels if I was, say, here at my parents' house. So maybe, but I just can't say for sure. So I'm not sure about the circumstances.
This was a really popular film when it came out, too. I remember tons of marketing for it. And, I mean, Ben Stiller was getting big at that time. Gwyneth Paltrow
very much
was
so.
Big. Of course.
Gwyneth Paltrow was so busy. They only had her for 10 days. This movie because she was so busy with other projects, and actually Ben Stiller was busy too, so you pretty much nailed it. Those two, they only had limited windows to film their stuff, and in the case of Gene Hackman, it was difficult. I don't know if you've read anything on this recently, but like the role was written with him in mind, and it was really difficult to get him to sign on for various reasons. One was, since he was the main character, they needed him for the whole thing, and he kind of didn't like that. And also another thing was financial, because they couldn't really pay him that much, and he sort of spent a lot of his career not getting paid much. So he wasn't exactly looking forward to, say, doing like 50, 60 days of shooting possibly, all for like not much of a paycheck. And I think in the end, all the actors, including these big names, worked for scale.
Just to work with Wes Anderson.
Yeah, and again, at this time, it just sort of shows, I guess, what they thought of him, because at this time, this is Wes Anderson. He's only a few films into his career. He's not necessarily a big name or anything. It's not like, the situation where everybody was clamoring to be in Thin Red Line because Terrence Malick was this amazing artiste, right? This is, a much less accomplished filmmaker at this point. So I guess it just shows how well a lot of these actors respected him and got along with him.
Well, I mean, Rushmore was huge, right? I mean, I know I saw
kind of like
Rushmore
an indie darling, right?
Yeah. Was it indie? Because, I mean, I know like Bottle Rocket was indie. And, I mean, I remember when Bottle Rocket came out. So,
yeah, when I use the term indie darling there, I don't even mean it necessarily technical, but, it just had that sort of feel, right? So maybe it wasn't indie at this point. So we can look into that to see exactly what the circumstances were. But this is sort of this is definitely Wes Anderson's breakout, where he starts to be a mainstream guy.
You find different definitions of what indie means. I mean,
exactly,
it's a monetary thing, right? So like less than so-and-so million or whatever the number is now, which is still kind of crazy to think, oh, you spent, $10 million and it's still an indie film, which, you say indie, I think like, $500,000 maybe, most.
Exactly. Like this movie's budget was $21 million, which is, we talked about this before, and again, this would be, so I mean, in today's money, that might be probably closer to 30 million, right? But one thing that's really disappeared kind of from the movie landscape in the last like 15 years or so is the mid-budget movie. Everything's either really low or really high. Like stuff that's made nowadays will say 30, 40, even 50 million. There's very little of that. And the only reason I even thought of that was because last year when Knives Out came out, somebody wrote an article talking about how like Knives Out was kind of like a throwback because it was basically a mid-budget movie. It was, it wasn't a big blockbuster, but it wasn't a little indie thing either. And those movies used to be everywhere because you think they would be. And now they've become a lot more rare.
I wonder why that is. I mean, I guess just sheer numbers have gone down for number of releases, right? So it may just be
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of economic factors that I wouldn't understand or even take into consideration. Plus, I know we have talked about like just how much studios nowadays are willing to put into a movie because they think the payoff will be high. Like they're like, okay, 150 million, 160 million, like we can do it because they see dollar signs. They think we can easily make 300 million off of it is what they're thinking.
That's ridiculous. I mean, they like gambling is what they do, because
they do.
Like these Warner Brothers DC films. I don't think any of them made their budget back, have they?
Justice League is like the first. It's like the second most expensive movie ever made. It was over 300 million. And of course, don't worry, now we're gonna get the good version. Apparently, it's not gonna save it for me. I'll see it just to see, because apparently it's quite different, but it's not gonna change anything for me. I don't think. It is interesting though, not to get us way off topic though, that like in this day and age that can be accomplished. That basically just a bunch of people cried enough to get this to happen. The whole release the Snyder Cut thing. And I don't know, it's kind of setting a dangerous precedent, isn't it? Because now it's just like, well, no movie is, exactly what the director wanted. And it's like, this cut, that cut. I don't know.
Because his daughter committed suicide, right? So he kind of left the project.
Yeah.
Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, he left the project, and then what was it?
Joss Whedon came in?
What's his name? Joss Whedon came in. And what a lot of people say is like, not just Whedon, but some other people too with Whedon were very kind of dismissive of what he'd done so far, and even to like various actors and people like, oh, we got to change this, we got to get rid of this. And some of the actors agreed with him, and some of them didn't, because some of them thought, no, this was important, or maybe their role was bigger. Because the actor that played Cyborg, I guess he was kind of a big ally of Snyder. And I think his role in the movie was bigger and will be bigger in this upcoming Snyder Cut, stuff like that. So I don't know. It's a lot of he said things. And I remember he came out and said, like, it wasn't just Joss Whedon. There was a few stuff, like Jeff Loeb was kind of an enabler on the set, like to people like being, mistreated, like nothing necessarily like, crimes being committed, but, just like being unprofessional or just being like asshole-ish and mean. We talked about this too. It's like sometimes you kind of have to be an asshole to get your movie made. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a thin line to walk, right? And especially nowadays, because there's certain stuff directors used to get away with that they can't anymore, and that's probably good. But at the same time, you always wonder, like, well, if they couldn't do that back then, what would the movie have been as good? So there's always that argument to be made, right? Yeah.
You think Kubrick would get canceled nowadays? Or William.
It is interesting to wonder, like, if like, yeah, I mean, would like a current generation of actors like work for guys like that? Because I mean, if you're an old enough actor and you've spanned generations, you've seen various things. But we've got actors coming up now that never dealt with the various conditions, and maybe that's for the good, as we said. But anyway, returning to this movie and assholes and stuff, I guess even once they had Hackman, I guess they had problems with him. Angelica Houston did not get along with him at all.
I don't think Gwyneth Paltrow did either.
Yeah. So there was definitely a lot of friction on the set.
I mean, was he known as a hard guy to work with? I mean, I've never heard that before.
I don't know. I think it had more to do with maybe where he was at that point in his life, but that's just a guess. So I don't actually know. And apparently, it was funny because like when they told him that they wrote the part for him, he didn't like that either. He's like, that's like you're assuming I'm like this. And he's like, no, I'm assuming you're an actor that can play this part. I'm not saying I wrote the part because it's just like you. I thought, he had to explain that to him because Hackman was mad. He's like, I don't like when people, write the part for me. I don't like them assuming they know me. It's like, no, they're assuming that you're talented, Anyway.
I would think that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah, you think it'd be, but no, he didn't. He was annoyed by it, or at least at first. Maybe when he explained it to him, it turned around because he did kick it. What is it? Hackman was hesitant about accepting the role, citing his lack of understanding of or commonalities with Royal. Hackman's agent persuaded him to take the role, though his reluctance led to Michael Caine being considered for the part. Gene Wilder was also rumored to be a possible choice.
I think Gene Wilder turned it down because he was retired.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they shopped it around to Hackman and he said no at first.
But I mean, this is the type of movie. This is a character-driven movie, so it's really important to get the actors you want, and really, that's what they got. Both Angelica Houston and Hackman, in both their cases, the role was written with them in mind. So we've got Gene Hackman as Royal Tenenbaum, Angelica Houston as Ethelene Tannenbaum, his embattled wife that he never divorced, Ben Stiller as Chaz, Gwyneth Paltrow as Margot, Luke Wilson as Richie. Then you've got Owen Wilson as Eli, the family friend, Bill Murray as Raleigh St. Clair, Margot's husband, Danny Glover as Henry Sherman, the accountant that courts Ethelene. And then you've got Kumar Polenta as Pagoda, the family. I don't know, he's supposed to be like a butler or something.
And this may be the best ensemble cast, you know? I know it's a big statement, but it's a hell of a cast in this thing. And everyone is great.
I think it may be the best ensemble cast as far as everybody like nailing it. There might be ensemble casts where personally I like some of the actors more, but this might be the best example of an ensemble cast where everybody is nailing their role, which is, really what makes the movie what it is. I mean, there's two things to make the movie what it is. It's character driven, and then of course there's like the world that Wes Anderson always creates with his interesting set pieces and locations. And this is also the first movie where he really, because the other two, like a Rushmore or Bottle because they didn't really have that. This is where he really shows the kind of guy he is with that, because this is the style he would take going forward. Pretty much any movie made after this would be set in this world. I know I used the term magic realism in the description there on Twitter, and we've used it for other movies. In this movie, the magic realism for him is actually dialed quite back. It's quite realistic in most ways. It's, if you compare it to something like one of his later movies, or even like A Life Aquatic, they're a lot more dreamlike in their atmosphere. This one is more realistic, more grounded in reality. But somewhere I had a good cat.
Sorry, I think we've got a little bit of a delay on one of us.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Okay, no, I don't even know where it is. I just had a quote that I got off the Wikipedia page. There's a section where they talk about the style, where somebody gives a pretty good quote about kind of what his style is sort of like. Here we go. So somebody named May Shark. Who's May Shark? I want the first name. The name must have appeared early because I get a first name. But anyway, somebody named May Shark, who I think is some sort of film critic or something, talks about the play. Okay, here we go. There's the quote. Like, the universe that he always sets his things in, where the colors are brighter, the bookshelves are meticulously ordered, the bunk beds aren't just made, they look like you bounce a silver dollar off them. But yeah, it's that kind of world.
And I like how it's like ambiguous as to what period of time this is, and he does that in a lot of his movies. But this is, you find out at the end, it is modern day with the date on the tombstone.
Right. I mean, you can figure it out because there's a part that they do let you know has to be 1978, and then they say 22 years later. So. Oh,
okay. Yeah, I guess you're right. But I mean, didn't it feel like that to you? Like there's no definitive moment. Like
he goes out of his way to like keep his movies having sort of a mid 20th century feel, right?
Which I think is smart.
Probably it is smart. Like I don't think you're ever going to see somebody whipping out like a cell phone in a Wes Anderson movie.
Right.
Right. It just wouldn't really fit. But sorry, guys.
Go back and look at films where they use flip phones. That dates a film like crazy. We're so used to smartphones.
Because I mean, this is a film that is set in 2001, but the way everything looks and the way the technology is used, it could also be set in like 1965.
Yep.
Type thing. And that's I just picked that year randomly, but that actually is the year that the other movie we did, like Moonrise Kingdom, was set in 65. It's set firmly in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But what's nice about this is like, just because it's 2001, I don't think it's like cheating or anything like that. Like, I realize that in the lives we lead, we're bombarded by the technology and stuff, but in 2001, you could see a lot of this stuff, and it's considered older, but it wouldn't necessarily be considered completely archaic.
Right.
Like people were certainly still using landlines a lot in 2001.
Yeah.
And certain like buildings and places they visited, they would have an older aesthetic, but that's pretty normal too, right? Like that's just like how sometimes some buildings are, and that's what's cool about them. You go to a place downtown, and it might have been built this many decades ago, and they kept that style,
right,
deliberately. And so you'll see a lot of locations like that in Wes Anderson film, like this one.
Yeah, even
which of course
wardrobes.
Yeah.
Wardrobes were basically like mid-70s, something like that. So,
yeah, hairstyles, wardrobes, everything like that. All very deliberate, but it all works, and it helps draw you in. Because what I'll just say is like, so this movie is told like as if it's a fictional book about their lives, and each thing it has a prologue, 8 chapters, and an epilogue, and at the beginning of each part, it'll actually show a bit in the book. And that whole opening where it shows the book being checked out of the library and stamped, that's actually Wes Anderson's hand doing the stamping. Wes Anderson also I can't remember which one, because I don't remember hearing him speak in an interview, but this is one in 2001, so he would have been fairly young. So maybe he's the younger voice. But when they do the flashback about Richie's meltdown when he's playing tennis, and you've got the 2 guys commentating, he's one of the 2 guys commentating. But I don't actually know which one.
It sounds like Jason Schwartzman, doesn't it? That's what I thought it was.
It does.
And I think all the Wilson brothers
which is funny because then Schwartzman just a few years later, Schwartzman becomes part of his regular stable of actors. Just a little bit after that. Oh, thanks, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is one we're definitely excited to get into. We've always been big fans of most of Wes Anderson's work, and we did do Moonrise Kingdom a few years ago, and we said, oh yeah, we'll definitely get back to him. Now it's I think like 2 years later, but yeah, and this is one of the favorites. This is a little early for me to say. I was probably going to say it later in the show, but yeah, if Life Aquatic is my favorite, this might be my second favorite, just because I love the world, and that's really what he's great at, is drawing you into this world.
Well, I haven't seen the
prologue helps too. So you got Alec Baldwin there. Yeah, I haven't seen the train one either, but I have seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is really great.
I think this is my favorite.
Oh man, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we're stepping on each other. I guess there is kind of a delay going on. We apologize for that, people. We'll try to leave a bit of space so that we don't. I was just gonna say, I think Fantastic Mr. Fox is so good that it's actually better than the book. And I don't say that too much about movies based on books. Although, Fantastic Mr. Fox is a Roald Dahl book. It's not like a great novel or anything, but it's a good book for what it is. But the movie just adds so much style and flair to it, as you would expect from a Wes Anderson joint.
Mm-hmm. It's such a, I don't know, man. Like he's such an auteur, and I haven't said this yet, but I didn't like this film when I first saw it. Like when I was younger, like my taste had changed, and someone asked me to review it on my YouTube channel years ago, and I went back and revisited it and just fell in love with it. And it's every frame of this film is filled with Easter eggs. Like you could see the detail and the amount of time and energy he put into making this film, and it definitely plays better on rewatches. Rewatchability is really great.
Yeah, you'll notice things in the background, and everything is there for a reason. Everything is really well thought out. And, just his technical skill is really interesting because I know one thing that Jay and I talk a lot about in movies that we like, and especially when we're slamming like movies of today, is we're both fans of the long take. And this movie's great at that. And I'll always find out an excuse to like throw in Ozu. Like there's parts in this movie that just feel so. It's the same way. He's moving the camera exactly the way Ozu does it. You'll have characters in a scene talking, and he'll just sit the camera down, and then he'll just pan between them. He doesn't cut, and he doesn't change angles a lot. He just pans between them, and I think it just adds just a richness. And I just think it just draws you in more.
It does.
It feels less artificial. I mean, you're watching a movie. A movie's an artificial thing. Everything about it is contrived and made up. But there's something about having that kind of camera work that makes it feel natural and real. And it just, it helps to have good dialogue and good performances too. Obviously, but I just mean, I think even in a scene where it's not necessarily the greatest dialogue or acting or whatever, that kind of that kind of style with the camera just helps you immerse yourself more into it and care more and be more engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're never going to hear, oh, he ripped off so-and-so. Like, he's so unique, his style. Like, I could see people trying to rip him off, but it's so, it's kind of like what you said. You're transformed into this world that's so quirky, yet so believable, and you feel like you're there. And it's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but just so well done.
That's why all his movies seem so watchable to me, because you feel so immersed so immediately.
Yeah.
In the case of this one, you get a really nice prologue with Alec Baldwin doing the narration. Alec Baldwin is a great voice for narration, a very rich voice, and you've got the instrumental version of Hey Jude playing, which again adds a sort of timeless. I know it's weird because Hey Jude is a Beatles song. It's obviously from the late 60s, but a lot of Beatles songs have a lot of timelessness to them. So at one point, yeah, you feel that it's a bit retro because they're saying he bought the house in what would have been, I guess, the mid 60s, because they said it was his 35th year. I think he was born in 32, so you do the math, the mid to late 60s. But at the same time, Hey Jude is, such a staple that it sort of transcends time too. So it's a really well thought out song to have to play while you're showing a montage of years passing. You can't do that with certain songs, because once the montage keeps going, then you better change up the song and get something current in there. But you don't have to do that. And of course, that's another piece of the puzzle that we'll talk about, is the music. Another thing that's so thought out when it comes to adding the soundtrack to this movie. And like a lot of Anderson movies, this has such an array of songs that if you're going to buy the soundtrack, it's two CDs. There's so much of it. They did the same. I actually own, again, one half of the Life Aquatic soundtrack, but there's a whole other disc that I didn't buy. But yeah. But yeah, you're just so drawn in with the narration, and sometimes narration in movies is annoying or clunky or unnecessary, but this just fits everything, right? It just fits. And the quick character introductions, just so you can get a sense of who they are and what they're all about, is done very quickly and efficiently. You've got a fairly, I guess, shrewd litigator, and then he marries I guess it's never really explained if she's like upper class or what, but she seems somewhat a classy woman. Then they have the children, and very quickly the children all emerge to be kind of we're prodigies, right? In different ways. You've got Chaz, that's Ben Stiller, who's some sort of like financial wizard. You've got Richie, that's Luke Wilson, who is a tennis prodigy and becomes a champion at a very early age. And then you've got the adopted daughter, adopted when she was 2, Margot, who is like a writing prodigy. She started writing plays when she was a kid, and even when she was like in grade 9, she got a grant and everything, and started a run of fairly successful plays. So they were all child prodigies in various fields and very successful at a young age, and a lot of it came from their upbringing too, because their mother basically dedicated that part of her life to just focusing on their education and nourishing all their gifts and encouraging all their pursuits, which is, definitely the right way of going about things. It's easier to do when you're in a good financial position, though, of course, right? There's even a part where, like, for some thing that Richie's working on, she's on the phone. He's like, I need $187. And she just makes a check out to him like that so he can use it because she just trusts him. So it's very easy to nurture your child's gifts when, you have a certain amount of financial flexibility.
Right.
But even even apart from that, the last thing I would ever do is give any sort of parenting advice beyond very general common sense things, because it's not my arena, but I'm hardly the only person to say a good thing to do when you're raising kids. And I'm not talking about so they'll grow up to be geniuses or successes. It's just to help them out, is to help them be well-rounded. Like, don't just let them focus on one thing. It's a good idea, especially at an early age, to introduce them to different things and encourage them to have different interests and different hobbies and things like that. Because that's usually the mark of a pretty smart person, is they'll usually have quite a few different interests and hobbies. And there's not much about this movie I can personally relate to, and it's funny because it is a movie that, for most movies that like get me emotionally, that's usually because there's something I can connect to myself. This movie, there's not really that much. I just think it's such a good movie that even without those things, I can still find it emotional. But if there is like a really loose connection, I can say like I can remember growing up in a very different environment, of course, because of age and location and all those things, circumstances. But I mean, I was very much encouraged by my parents in the same way to like pursue different, to the point where it wasn't just encouragement. Like there were, when I was especially young, there were things they wanted me to do that I didn't like. I didn't even want to skate when I was a little kid, which is hard to believe considering skating is one of the joys of my life. But it's true. When I was like 3 and 4, started skating, all I ever did was complain about it. And I complained when I started playing hockey when I was 5 because I was like, it takes too long to put all the gear on and it's heavy and all this stuff. So yeah, sometimes, especially when you're a little kid, you just have to stick with it for a little while. I mean, yeah, if a kid hates something, you can let them quit. But I think when you've got really little kids, don't let them quit right away because they don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. My parents were really, really nurturing to my interests as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like hey, I want to try this. They're like, okay, cool. Let's go get you, whatever the supplies you need for that or whatever. Really cool. I try to do the same for my kids, but
yeah. And as we said, it is hard to do that, especially when so many things cost money. So
exactly.
You do the best you can. But
a lot of things get easier with money.
For sure. And that's really the advantage that these kids had. They came from he worked in legal profession. He was a litigator. So he did.
And Chaz got him disbarred, right?
Yeah, Chaz was the one that got him disbarred for stuff that he had done to Chaz personally, including like skimming money off his various businesses. That's a great scene too in the flashback when they're before the judge and they're saying this stuff, and then he said he also stole, what was it? He stole like money out of my
bonds or something.
Yeah, stole bonds out of like my safety deposit box, or like when I was 14. Camera pans back over to him. He just goes, he just laughs nervously. He can't deny it. He did it. Yeah, so that's the other thing. So we have his relationship with his children before he becomes estranged with the family, was that he always favored Richie. He favored Richie and would often exclude the other two. And he also made a point of always reminding Margot that she was adopted. He would always like tell people that she was adopted when introducing and stuff, which, yeah. So he actually suffers from a flaw that I think I have too, although I don't think I would be quite as dumb about it as he is. And it's another reason, like I said, like I don't have kids or anything like that. But when I deal with kids, which is very rarely, but when I do deal with kids, I don't change anything about the way I talk or anything. And I mean, that's fine because it's not going to really lead to anything weird or inappropriate. I know the difference, but he's the same way with his kids. It starts like when he's discussing the separation from his mother, just the way he answers the questions and everything. They're all talking like adults. Yeah. And the reason, even though he's trying his best to explain, because like most kids say, is it our fault? You would just say no. Now he does say no, and he reiterates, but he does say, well, I can't say that doesn't factor into it. You make certain sacrifices when you're having children, and that does. And he's like, but no, it's not your fault. And then, of course, there's the flashback part. Again, this part of the prologue, where when she puts on one of her plays for her birthday party, and they put on the play, and then they're trying to ask him what he thought of it. And he just gives his honest opinion. He doesn't and he, treats it the way he'd treat any play instead of, this. It's fantastic that my 10-year-old daughter made a whole play. Like, no, he's just like, I don't know. I couldn't follow it. It seemed pretty silly. Just a bunch of kids in costumes. And then he's like, by the way, happy birthday. And she just leaves. So he had a very awkward relationship with his kids, except for Richie, who was the favorite, who he would take around town and do all sorts of fun things with, which leads to its own montage of them getting into trouble and stuff. And what was it with Chaz? And then there's the incident of his summer property, which Chaz helped him buy. There's the part where they're playing with the BB guns, and I guess it's supposed to be clear that Richie is on one team with his friend Eli, which is the character whose adult form is played by Owen Wilson, and then you've got Chaz and Royal on one team. But then when when Chaz thinks he's about to get the drop on the other team, suddenly he gets called from Royal, who's got a bead on him from the house. He's like, "Hold it right there, Chaz." Like, "What are you doing? You're on my team." He's like, "There's no teams," and he shoots him, and he gets a BB lodged between his knuckles, which stays there into adultness. So that's, part of an emotional and literal scarring that he inflicted upon Chaz. So it's shortly after that, sometime in the 80s. Sometime in the 80s when his kids are transitioning into young adults that and he gets disbarred, and he actually winds up going to white collar prison for a while, and at that point he becomes completely estranged from the family. And of course the point of the movie is him trying to sort of get back in with his family for first probably kind of selfish reasons, but then eventually he has genuine reasons that we'll get into. Mm-hmm. But so all this is told very quickly and efficiently in the prologue with help of narration. And I know in a lot of movies narration can seem clunky. Here, no, it just fits so well. Alec Baldwin's rich voice, the transitions between the scenes, it's a really great, well done prologue, one of the best I've seen.
Exactly. I mean, the prologue may be my favorite part of the film. It's so entertaining.
And it introduces to the other star of the movie, which is the house. And it's a real house. And the great thing about it is that all the interior stuff is in that house. They only cheated in one place. And it's the one place that you would guess because it doesn't feel right, which is the kitchen. Remember that scene where he and Henry are talking in the kitchen? Doesn't that kitchen seem small and drab?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to really fit that house. It's the house next door. They couldn't use the kitchen from the actual house because of something to do. I guess it didn't have any windows. And that wouldn't work for how they were going to film, like lighting or how they set up the camera or something like that. So that's the only part where they cheated, is that they are actually using the house next door for the kitchen. And the kitchen really doesn't seem to fit the house at all. It just seems like a small kitchen that would not be attached to this big 4-story townhouse. Those beautiful townhouses they have in New York.
That's when he calls him Coltrane, right? He calls Henry Coltrane.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's just
I love that stuff.
Did you just call me Coltrane? It's like, no, I didn't.
You want to talk jive?
If I did,
I'll talk jive.
Yeah.
He's like a 70s speaking urban person,
Right. And you get that's a part of it, the big theme in the movie is his redemption, but there's also something to be said about nostalgia, of course, because we have a bunch of young adults in their 30s that wind up in their childhood home again, and their childhood years were very much their glory. They didn't really face any sort of failure or loss until they were older. Now, they never say anything about Chaz, his business not doing well. For him, it's a personal tragedy in that his wife dies in a plane crash. But whereas you got Richie has his meltdown because of what happened with Margot, and Margot just has a weird sort of just drifting away, which there's not really a good explanation for, but I mean, it's just something that happens to a lot of artists, right? She was hot when she was young, she had successful plays, and then she got to a point where she just couldn't even write anything. I think they said she hadn't written anything in 7 or 8 years at this point, which is a pretty common thing with a lot of people, especially if they had success young. It'll happen. But yeah, in the case of Chaz, it's not like suddenly his businesses weren't doing well or anything like that. It's just within the last year, he lost his wife, and he's never really dealt with it properly. And now he's got this crazy obsession with safety, of course, that he projects onto his kids, and is really kind of messing up their lives to a certain part. When we're introduced to him as an adult with the kids, what's he doing? He's running a crazy safety drill in the middle of the night. He's timing them with a stopwatch, and he's just 4 minutes, 48 seconds. We're all dead. Good job. We forgot the dog. It's it doesn't matter because we'd all be dead. But yeah, so anyway, my point was, so there's a lot of nostalgia running through the movie because it's about adult children coming back to their childhood home. And of course, but the other side of it, the less personal side is, and you see it through Royal's character, is sort of a longing for the New York of old. Now, this is set in New York. And we've, of course, talked about the city of New York several times on the show because a lot of movies are set there. And one of the things we talked about is sort of the classic New York that doesn't exist anymore. And that's what this is really about. Because 90s was really when they started to clean up New York and gentrification and things like that. But if you have that era of say the 60s through the end of the 80s, that's kind of the classic gritty dirty, crime-filled, exciting, romantic New York that so many movies and things are set in. And you can see that's like part of what Royal's character represents, because as you said, he has that sort of 70s way of talking. And then when you see the stuff that he did with his kids in the 70s, he repeats all that with Chaz's sons. And it's almost like a return to that era. And it's kind of a nod even to some of Gene Hackman's work. You could say, oh, this is kind of like the New York of The French Connection, which came out in 1971, which he starred in, those sort of gritty New York streets. So you've got that running through it too. It's not just a personal redemption, but it's also sort of like a longing for a New York that's mostly gone, but of course you can still find little corners of here and there. So that's running through it too, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah. And Margot was married to Bill Murray's character. I don't have the name in front of me.
Raleigh Sinclair. Or is it Sinclair or St. Clair? I'm just going to check that. St. Clair. Raleigh St. Clair.
Yeah. Very unusual names in this.
Yeah. Helps you remember them, though, I think.
Yeah. And I love when he's with, is it Dudley, the boy's name?
Right. So a little subplot is the fact that, like, he's a neurologist, and he's come upon, like, his newest, like, subject, which is this kid, Dudley, who has a sort of a weird combination of psychological issues that he thinks, like, combine them into a very special condition, which he named after the kid, like, Hurts something's syndrome or something like that. And that's what his, like, life's work is now becoming. It's all based on this Dudley kid, who was cast. I guess he was on the cast of Freaks and Geeks at the time. And
yeah, that's where I remember seeing him.
And Wes Anderson was friends with Judd Apatow, so through that he found that kid. And that's an amusing little subplot. The stuff with that. All those scenes are really funny, and it's interesting too because it's funny stuff with Bill Murray, but it's at least at this point, because we would see it later in his career too. But I think at this point he hadn't really done humor exactly like that. Although you do have to say the very first part where he's like setting up the test for him is almost like when he's setting up the test at the start of Ghostbusters, although it's quite different. But he's just doing those psychological things. I had to do this too, where they put the things together and then you're supposed to do it. I'm bad at it too, but I'm not as bad as he is. Like his problem was like he's actually seeing it that way. Mine isn't that I see things wrong. It's that I just really struggle to construct it in my brain three-dimensionally. Like I know what I'm supposed to get. I know what the end thing is there, but yeah. So that's one thing like I'm not good at.
Yeah, Bill Murray doesn't have a lot of screen time, but he really, chews it up when he's there. Like when he's putting the puzzle together, I just love that part. He's like, oh, where's that red one going to go?
Yeah. Because even though he's like playing against type, there's still some stuff there that's so much like a Bill Murray-ism, where you wonder if he just like punched up the dialogue himself or things like that. That's why I've always, I don't want to turn this to a thing, because he's one of my favorite actors, period, not just comedic actors. I just love them. But actors like that, it's not even just the lines. It's just what kind of inflection to use and things like that. Like, where he shows it back and he's just like, wow, he's just like fascinating or something like that. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, so it's interesting that we got Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson in this, but they're not playing brothers. Not that different. Obviously they're not usually playing brothers. All I'm saying is in this movie, there's a chance where obviously they could have been playing brothers, but no, they cast Ben Stiller as the other brother, and instead cast Owen Wilson as the friend who is basically best friends with Eli, living next door. And he's kind of interesting too, in that even though he's not part of the family, he was always there. He was kind of like an unofficial member because he was over so often. And he himself, even though it wasn't as expected of him, he wound up having a certain amount of success at a young age too. Although his successes are more recent, which kind of contrasts against the others, is that now he's achieved some measure of a literary celebrity by having like a fairly well popular novel. It was his second novel. So you've got that played against, the situation these others find themselves in. But of course, he's got his own problems because everybody in these movies does have their own sort of issues that rise to the surface. So that's what's cool too. It's really well balanced because the main story is about Royal and sort of his quest for redemption and to try to reunite with his family and get them to forgive him and accept him again. But you've also got some other moving parts too that all factor in, and even Eli Cash has his part to play.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had something about how he found the house. Oh, it's funny too. Sorry, just things keep kind of randomly occurring to me rather than doing this in any sort of order that makes sense. But last year, was that the last series we did? Or yeah, I guess the last series we did was the Orson Welles series, and we did 4 movies for that. But there were certain movies that we didn't do that we were considering, and one we were considering was The Magnificent Ambersons, and that's really the movie that this is kind of most inspired by, in that both sort of the core of the story is about like a family that was fairly successful and prominent in the past have now, like, their glory has diminished. So they have that in common. And then there's some filmmaking stuff techniques that's kind of in common with Wells too, but we don't really have to get into that. That's just some stuff that I found reading. But it's interesting because I did actually watch it last year. I hadn't seen it before, just in case we were going to do it for a show. We didn't wind up doing it, but yeah, you can feel a little of the influence of that here. Obviously, the tone is very different because Magnificent Ambersons is like, more straight drama. It's much more somber, whereas this is the usual mix of drama and comedy that Anderson is so good at doing. Maybe probably one of the very best.
Yeah.
Because it's funny. Like there's a lot of movies that are considered straight comedies. And that's what they are. They have a comedic tone and things are funny and they're for laughs, that I don't find nearly as funny as a lot of Wes Anderson movies, which have their serious and somber moments. But sometimes that even helps emphasize just how funny the funny parts are, I guess.
I wouldn't exactly call it a dark comedy, but it's not far from there.
Yeah. Just some sort of almost like a half and half, like half drama, half comedy. People say dramedy sometimes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I love some of his other. Yeah, some of his other movies do get a bit darker, in like particularly the Grand Budapest Hotel, because of the stakes in that. You got like a villain that's really going to try to like hurt people. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but there's stakes in that movie where people were in danger.
Yeah. I was going to say most of the film was fairly lighthearted, and except for the end sequence, and then when Richie cuts slits his wrist, like that's pretty hardcore, man.
It's heavy stuff. And since we're jumping to it, I think it's the other thing. Like, have you ever before or since seen Luke Wilson act that well? You wouldn't even think it was possible.
I haven't even seen him in a lot of stuff, I don't think.
He
that does like romantic comedies and stuff.
Yeah, that whole scene, like just his expression and everything, the way he's looking in the mirror. I know that sometimes when you talk about things like that, it doesn't sound that hard, but I think it's actually pretty hard, because I know if I was doing the scene, I don't know, I think it would really come across as forced. And I know you're not a professional actor, are you? I know, but I just mean sometimes when you're trying to like really nail something like this, this is really serious. This guy's at rock bottom. His heart is shattered. He doesn't want to go on. It's a lot of stuff to carry, and you want to be able to convey it, but you also want to convey it in a way that comes across as believable. That's hard stuff to do, and like just the way he does all that is just great. The music helps too, but still, it's just like he says that line, but then the rest is all conveyed through just his facial expression and just some movements, and it's really great. Because yeah, it's really you said Luke Wilson is more like romantic comedy type thing. He was an old school, as kind of the straight man while Will Ferrell and other people ran around. But
he was great.
For a movie that, yeah, there you go. For what it is, right? He was good for for what it called for. He was good at it. But this is as you said, even for a movie with a lighter tone like this, that is a very dark, serious moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think he does just such a great job of it. And he's really, I've had to think about this too. Even though Royal is kind of our main character, and he drives the action. Royal drives the action. He's the one telling the lies and setting things up that makes things go. It's really Richie's kind of the heart of it. Because if you didn't have Richie's attempted suicide, especially, Royal probably wouldn't have been able to find his way back into the good graces.
Right.
And also just the way it's just so different from anything that Luke Wilson has done before, and that he's just sort of like this guy wandering around in a daze, almost. He's just sort of like a shell of a man. He's just sort of sadness personified. But at the same time, he's not like one of those tortured people that won't like open up or anything. Like, he tries to engage with his family, and all this does is piss Chaz off. Because it's kind of like, how anytime you get in an argument with somebody, especially if it's like a girlfriend or something like that, or somebody you're really close to, and you're really wound up and mad, but they're staying calm, and all that does is make you madder.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that thing, because he's just like, because they're flipping out. You got Chaz flipping out. This is, of course, before the lie is revealed, because, of course, to get back into his family's good graces, Royal lies. He says that he's dying, that he'll be dead in 6 weeks, that he's suffering from stomach cancer. So that's the only reason, really, they're even going to let him try to get back into their lives. But even though Chaz doesn't suspect him of lying, Chaz hates him so much at this point, because, okay, that's another good joke, right? He's like, you're going to go up and tell him to get out? And then you get to see him. The whole tableau is set up. He's in the hospital bed. He's hooked up to the IV. He's got the guy standing by. And then the camera pans to Chaz, and Chaz goes, "Get out." It really shows how much he hates him. But anyway, yeah. Before that, when he's talking to Richie, Richie's giving all these like straightforward, honest, emotional answers, and it's just driving Chaz nuts. Because, like, I know you're hurting. It's like, I'm your brother, and I love you. And he's just like, shut up, stop that. And he's just like, I can't stand like, if you feel that way about your father. He's like, he's your father too. And he's just like, shut up. So it's interesting. They do a good job of showing two men that are both in pain, but for different reasons, and the way they react to it is so different. Because, of course, Chaz is in pain. He lost his wife only a year ago in a crazy freak accident that he actually was part of. He and his sons survived it. The dog survived it. So they don't to make a point of it, but it's something to think about. There's that thing called survivor's guilt, right? When you live through something and other people don't, you're like, why? There's no reason, and people often will feel guilty about it. So I'm sure that's all wrapped up in Chaz's head too. And yeah, it's interesting because Chaz isn't ready to confront his pain. He'll deflect it and everything like that. And Richie is confronting his pain, but it's not helping. He's just like mired in it. He can't, he's like drowning in it. He can't get out of it. But, they both wind up helping each other. And the catalyst does turn out to be Royal. As I said, he really does drive the action, although he does it through deception at first.
Yeah. I mean, Richie's come to terms with his, sadness that he's in love with his adopted sister.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically why he had why he floundered so badly on that I think the last match he had.
Right. The last match was just a couple days after she married Raleigh.
Right. And then they were in the audience.
Yeah. And they were in the audience during it. And that was just the end of his career. And ever since then, he was basically a recluse. And at the start of the movie, he'd been on a voyage on a ship for like probably more than a year, because they said all these different places he'd been all over the world. Halifax gets a mention in this movie because when he decides to leave, he disembarks at Halifax. That's where they let him off. We don't see it or anything like that, but then from Halifax he makes his way to the port into New York, where he is met by Margot, who's dropped off by one of the Green Line buses. So there's two main forms of transportation in this movie. One is gypsy cabs, and the other is the Green Line bus. And they'll be seen and used over and over again as the movie goes. I guess they're just based on various things. I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, a city like New York must have so many different cab companies and cab lines.
Yeah, that does look like a great cab to me.
No, I think the best moment for that cab is when Royal has finally, his lie has been found out, And now even Richie can't stand up for him, right? Because it's like, but you will never die. He goes, but I'm gonna live. It's like, yeah, because he just created this stupid lie. It's like I was your biggest supporter, but I can't defend this, you know. And they're kicking him out and stuff. And then Pagoda stabs him again, like he did when they first met. He takes out a Swiss Army knife and stabs him. I like how he stabs him. The cabbie does nothing, and then they just get in the cab together. That really nails what the gypsy cab's all about in New York. Like, hey, whatever you guys do is not my business. Imagine you pull up to pick up two guys. One stabs the other. Then he kind of helps them into the cab, and I'm sure you don't even ask any questions. Actually, I don't think I did this consciously, but I may have subconsciously stolen that deal of their backstory for a character in the only novel I ever wrote. So back in like 2005, I only ever completed one novel in my life, and I wrote this novel with a terrible title called Finding, which is a terrible, pretentious title. And that was a silly, I don't want to turn this all about me, but it was all about how there was this guy who was like some aimless 30-something who the rest of his family didn't like and kind of thought he was immature and stuff. And he was like a private investigator, but that mostly was just boring stuff like following around, cheating laws and stuff like that. And he finds out that his like great uncle died. And he was the only person in his family who kind of liked his great uncle. The rest of his family is kind of well-to-do, and they were embarrassed by the great uncle because the great uncle was this guy who called himself Sir Winston, but he wasn't a knight. But he was like he wanted to be like a globe-trotting adventurer. You know, he went to, you know, he tried to climb mountains and do all these things, and he always encouraged this kid. Anyway, he died, and it's all about how his job is to scatter his ashes over the Great Barrier Reef, and then I have this whole thing where he winds up inadvertently getting mixed up with a real spy and an assassin, and it's all stupid stuff. But anyway, for part of the backstory for the Sir Winston guy I had this character, I can't even remember what his name was, but he was like a young Indian guy who became like kind of his sidekick. And he meets the main character eventually because he's like the only other person that knew him. But anyway, I made up the backstory that they met where it was something like, I don't know, he was somewhere like in Italy or something, and a bunch of thugs attacked him, and then this Indian guy came and helped them fight them off. It's kind of similar, except in this case he didn't actually stab him because when he's telling a story about how he met Pagoda, he said, you know, he saved my life after I got stabbed. I was in Calcutta and he carried me to the hospital to save me. Like, who stabbed you? Well, actually, he stabbed me. He'd been hired to kill me. There's a price on my head. So mine was different than that. Mine, he didn't attack him himself. He heroically helped fight off guys. But I wonder the timing of that. It was around 2005. I wonder if I was inspired by that or not. I don't know. It's so long ago, I can't remember. I might have been directly inspired and said, yes, I'm going to put something like that in, or it might have been subconscious, or it might have been a coincidence. But I just thought of that today. I haven't thought of that in a long time. But anyway.
I like it. When Richie's having his meltdown on the tennis court, it says he has both shoes off and one sock.
Yeah.
It's just so odd, you know.
Yeah, and after Eli, we'll jump at the end. After Eli crashes the car at the end, he's missing like a shoe and a sock or something. And he's like, "What happened to my shoe?" Yeah. Man, it's weird though that, and not to turn something funny into something horrible and grisly, but you hear about that happening in like car accidents. And I was reading just a little while ago about the trial of that stupid incel killer that was in Toronto. This guy that like got a rental van and like drove over a bunch of people, right? And he killed a bunch of people. And like one of the details was like one of the people he killed was like an 80-something-year-old woman, and he hit her so hard her shoes and socks came off. Like, yeah, that's hard to fathom. Like, just in physics, I don't even mean how terrible. Of course, it's terrible. I just mean getting hit by a vehicle that causes that to happen to your feet. It's crazy, yeah. But it can happen.
Literally knock your socks off.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. We use it as like an expression because it sounds like something that really can't happen.
Right.
It's like, I don't care how hard you hit me. My socks are on my feet. Like, you know, but it actually knocked her shoes and socks off, which is just crazy how physics works sometimes. I don't mean to make a laugh about a horrible murder and a death or anything like that. I'm just saying it's just such a shocking thing to think that can happen. Anyway, yeah, I took something kind of funny, made it grisly. But anyway, yeah. Well, what happened to my shoe? But so what other characters can we jump to? I guess we can do Gwyneth Paltrow. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Sorry about this.
Okay.
So maybe riff on her for a sec.
Here we go. 30 seconds. I'm going to time it. Counting down. When will Cole return? Will Cole return? Oh, 30 seconds is up. Longer than 30 seconds indeed. But no, I said, I didn't like this film when I first saw it. I just didn't really, I don't know, my tastes have changed a lot, but this was a really popular film then. And I just didn't care for it, but I've turned around and now I really love it. Longer than 30 seconds, Cole. I ran the timer.
Well, I guess I'll have to.
I ran the countdown.
I'll have to pay some demerits too, or whatever.
Pink slips are coming your way.
But are we on Margot?
Sure.
Okay, so obviously, and we were talking about this before the show, how neither of us really like Gwyneth Paltrow, and in this case, sometimes people are just so annoying that it's hard to separate them from their work, of course. Because Gwyneth Paltrow is, maybe the best current example of like a rich twit that has completely divorced themselves from reality, right? Like she's just the perfect example of that kind of elitism and snobbery and not even understanding how ordinary people live and things like that. Her goop thing and all these terrible, embarrassing things she had. But you try to separate that. But even as an actress, she's never been particularly interesting to you or I. She's been in some good movies, but it didn't really matter that it was her. I love Seven, but it could have been another actress. She's not that important. She's in, she plays Pepper Potts in the Marvel movies, which I'm okay with. But again, it could have been someone else. It doesn't matter to me. But this is like maybe the one performance that she gives that I like. She is really well cast, like the rest of the people, because she is really good at playing sort of like a sullen and sad kind of character who is kind of always putting up barriers around her and separating herself from other people, is Margot, which makes sense. Again, when you're looking at the dynamic of the family, their various prodigies, she's the creative prodigy, she's the writer, she's the playwright, and she lives, as we find out eventually once they run the background check on her, because much of her life her family isn't aware of, but you find out she's kind of lived that kind of typical life of an artist, particularly right. With taking on various lovers. She really did a lot of that, which of course winds up deeply upsetting Raleigh, because a lot of it was while they were married, and of course upsets Richie too. But yeah, I really do like her in this, just like I like everybody else. So I'll give credit to her. She's well cast and she does a really good job. It's really the only time she played a character kind of like this.
I made a joke maybe last night about me not liking Gwyneth Paltrow, and then you brought up Contagion, and I said, the Contagion's great because she dies like in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, she does. Exactly. Because I've seen her and stuff, even in stuff I like I think she's fine, but she doesn't really make any sort of impact on me. But in this, just like everybody else, she carries her weight in this movie. She plays her role well. I like Margot quite a bit. She might be the character. I don't mean to be cliche because I'm a writer, but I just mean she probably is the character I can relate to the most in some ways. Although she has sort of an independent streak that I wish I could have had, but and I did find this out too in some of the reading I did. So there's a part again in the backstory that's in the prologue that talks about how when she was about 10 years old, she and Richie ran away from home and spent a few months staying at what place was it specifically? It was something. It was Archives. It was the something Archives, right? And I always figured, it can't be a coincidence. That's too close to a book that I read growing up. That a lot of people read growing up. as a long title. I know that'll start, but it's the mixed up files of. It's like Mrs. something. I need to
I've heard
find
of that.
exactly where it
Yeah.
fits. Right, which was a book from the late '60s about a brother and sister doing pretty much the exact same thing, except they go to they go to a museum of natural history in New York, I think. Anyway, and that was a book that I read a few times when I was young. And I think it's influenced. It was written, I think, in the late '60s, so I'm sure several generations of kids have read it and been influenced by it. And I always figured, it's too close. There's no way that that Wes Anderson didn't know about this. And I finally found out today confirmation that yes, that's exactly what he based it on. That he did read that book when he was a kid, and he wanted the same thing. I should read it again. That's one I haven't read in like 30 years. Maybe not 30, but close to 30 years. Long time. It's interesting too, because like it does eventually have more of a plot, and that's where the title comes from. Because at first it's just about them running away from home and staying there, but then eventually they like stumble upon this kind of like semi-mystery thing they can solve. It's been so long. It's interesting too, because in that one, she's the only daughter in a family, and she has several brothers. And she thinks long and hard about which one was the ideal one to take with her. And she picks the second youngest, and she has her various reasons. One being that he also has a lot of money because he keeps cheating his friend at a card game or something. But he has like $25 or something like that, which is a ton of money back then, especially to a kid. So that's one of the main reasons. This is one of the only things I can really remember about it, because I literally haven't read it since I was like maybe 10. So a very long time ago. But what the fuck is the full title? I need to find it. It is mentioned on the Wikipedia page. Why can't I find it? I just want to say the full title because it's going to bother you. It's from the mixed up files of Mrs. Something 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 is what it's called. It's annoyed that I can't find it now that I actually need it. From the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Weiler. So there you go. A book by E.L. Koensberg. But anyway, yeah. So I haven't read that in a million years, but like a lot of books I read growing up, it was a book my sister owned. She might have even directly recommended it to me, because my sister and I kind of had that relationship too. We might have run away together and stuff, because even though there was a 3-year gap between us, we were a lot alike and had a lot in common. We were fairly close. But anyway, I always suspected that for years. I never looked into it, but today I've confirmed that yeah, that's exactly why that detail is in the plot, because Wes Anderson took it from the book, because he said that it was I guess influential. But yeah, so when we come to it, she's been married to Raleigh for a few years, but at this point she's become completely kind of removed and despondent. She's spending most of her time in the bathtub away from and not talking to anybody, and you don't really know what she's upset about or anything like that. It's never really pinpointed. And her, it's just sort of like a sense of ennui, which again fits the whole writer trope a lot. She's just sort of withdrawn from life, and she's in her own little spiral. And it's interesting too. There's an interesting line. He goes home because in part of his weird mania about nothing being safe, he drags his kids there because he says, the house isn't safe enough, so they need to update the house. They need to get more sprinklers installed and stuff like that. So then when Etheline, the mother, goes to see Margot, and she mentions that Chaz is there now, she gets upset and says, well, why is he allowed to do that? Which makes it sound like she wanted to come home but wasn't allowed. But I don't think that's true. I think that's just something in her head. It's hard to imagine Etheline refusing her to come home. Etheline seems like a very kind, understanding person. I couldn't imagine, Margot saying, I want to come home and spend some time with you, and her saying no. So makes you wonder a little bit what's going on in Margot's head there, because she seems a little annoyed by it. She's like, well, why is he allowed to do that? As if saying that she wasn't allowed. And of course, then she says, of course you are allowed. And then Margot moves in too. And then the third would be Richie, who, it's funny because Chaz makes that decision based on kind of his weird mania and psychosis. Margot makes the decision based on hearing about Chaz going back. But in the case of Richie, it's just coincidental timing. Like he'd been at sea for a long time, and then he decides to write the letter to Eli. And in the letter, he admits that the thing that he'd never told anybody in his life, that he's in love with Margot, or at least he thinks he is. And then he just thinks, I have to come to shore. I have to go back. I have to see them. And the timing just lines up. Like he doesn't go because of anything that Royal said or did. This is before that, and he doesn't go because of the other two kids. It just lines up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. It all works because then they all wind up at the house together, which is the whole point. And then Royal weasels his way into it by saying that he's dying.
And
yeah, the house is definitely the other star of the movie, which we'll get to in a second. Go ahead.
And Eli is having an affair with Margot, and that's when he tells her that Richie's in love with her.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too.
We haven't
like. Sorry, we did it again. No, I was just going to say that's interesting timing too, because Eli's always been around, but they don't make it sound like she and Eli have been together a long time. It seems like it's a more recent thing. Anyway,
we haven't really talked about Eli a lot yet, but he's obviously the neighbor, and he has I don't know if it's a drug addiction, but he does a lot of drugs. Like he takes a lot of psychedelics and stuff. Like, I know he's on mescaline at one point. He's smoking out of like a long.
mm-hmm.
Like an opium pipe or something, isn't it? I don't even know what to put in there.
But yeah, I think it's in his case, he didn't have a drug problem for a long time either. It was because he'd done whatever he did, and then he kind of had a popular novel that did well. But what happened was when his other novel didn't do well, he didn't know how to take the criticism, right? Because you saw him walking out of an interview when they just asked him, what went wrong with this novel? Like even that was enough to be he was overly sensitive about. And I think when we're introduced to him for the first time as an adult, he's on the phone with Margot, and he's like whining to her about some review he got. He's like, why are they going out of the way to say I'm not a genius? Like, what do you think about that? So he has kind of a fragile ego, and I think that's really where the drug stuff comes in. Where it's either his way of dealing with it, or also thinks maybe the drugs, like a lot of writers think, will give me some inspiration. But it gets out of hand very quickly. Because that's the other thing. Because I think if he had been like a long-time drug user, he'd have more of a handle on it. I think the idea is like he doesn't know what he's doing at all, right? And that's why it spins out of control so quickly, because he'd never really done that kind of stuff before.
That makes sense. With his newfound celebrity.
Right. He's got this newfound celebrity, and he likes it, but he can't take the other side of it. Like if somebody criticizes him or says his work isn't good, he sort of goes to pieces over it and takes it really personally.
Do you know the scene where Richie goes and confronts Eli about him telling Margot? The paintings in there are just insane. And is that he didn't paint those, right? So that's like got to be some specific artist that does that. Yeah,
I think so. It's funny. I hadn't thought of it. It's funny. I know there are paintings in it, but I don't remember it. Because the thing I remember from the scene is like there's a piano piece from the Carnival of the Animals by St. Saëns. It's called The Swan, which is a piece I play. It's one of the only pieces I'm still any good at because I have a song that I play every once in a while. So that's the main thing I remember from that scene is that's playing. It's a long sort of somber piano song. And yeah, I know there are paintings, but I'm blanking on what any of them look like. I guess because I just think about the song.
They're like biker gangs. Like one of them, they're ripping someone apart, and then
wow,
it's like biker gangs, but they're also like some sort of he's really into like Native American culture for some reason, or maybe even Aztec at one point. But yeah, just weird.
Yeah, it's funny too, like how they set him up. So you get the idea that like his literary celebrity probably will be short-lived, or that like it's not really going to be deeply appreciated. Like maybe it's popular, but critics aren't going to love it. Because when he has the new book coming out about Custer, and they're interviewing, and he's walking through, he's just like, of course, history presupposes, of course, that he died at Little Bighorn, but this book thinks, what if he didn't? Yeah. And that's it. That's like his brilliant revelation. That's it. That's the hook there. That's sort of like so clever and deep that nobody else would have ever thought of. Anyway, and he uses an adjective in the part where he's reading that I wonder if it's a made up word. I should have looked it up. Because remember, he's giving a little reading and talking about how they're going to ride off. Just towards the end, it's like an adverb or an adjective, and it's a ridiculous word that I've never heard in my life. And I wonder if it's a real word or if it's just made up for the scene, but I can't remember now. But he's talking about how they're saddling up and getting to ride out, and he's using all sorts of really lush language, as some writers do. But yeah, I wish I could find that blurb of dialogue, because he uses an absolutely insane word that somebody like me, I've never come across ever anywhere else in all the reading and stuff I do.
But now I'm curious.
Yeah, again, it drives home the point that maybe he's a bit in over his head, right? He wants to sound a bit smarter and more artistic, than he really is, which isn't a crime. I think all writers do that to a certain extent.
Let me send you a link to these paintings. I want you to check these out because you'll definitely remember when you see them.
Let's have a look here. Because, I knew there were several really large paintings on the wall behind
they're
them.
Huge. They're like 10 by 5 or 10 by 8 or something.
Unfortunately, all this does is take me to like a login page.
What the fuck?
It won't jump to the actual paintings. Let me try it again. Let's see.
It's just a Google search.
Yeah, it just takes me to a login page for paintingvalley.com.
Well, let me try it. Yeah, that's the site it's on. But let me try again.
Yeah. But I don't know. I guess I just really wasn't focusing on them because I knew there were several large paintings. I just and I watched the movie twice. Watched it yesterday and today because I had the time. So it's like very recently I saw them, and yet I guess I just did not focus on them.
Try this. This is smaller, but it you get the picture.
Okay, there's one of them. Motorcycle gang with the crazy masks.
And the other one is the same gang, but they're tearing apart another person.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's based on like Mexican drug cartels. They do crazy shit like that, right?
I'd love to know the art. I mean, hell, maybe Wes Anderson painted those or something.
I know the sketches that Richie did, I think, were done by Wes Anderson. Because remember, that was one of the things that Richie did when he was a kid that he wasn't any good at, which is art. But he did all sorts of portraits of Margot. I'm pretty sure those were done by Wes Anderson. I know his brother draws a lot of sketches for stuff that he comes up with ideas for movies. That's like one of the first things he does is like when he has an idea for a movie and characters, he'll get his brother to draw them. There might even be a book of that.
Wes Anderson's brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's his brother's name? Hold on. Because that's brought up in that same interview I was talking about. Must be further down. The first thing they talk about is the house, then some stuff about Gene Hackman, stuff about Orson Welles, blah, blah, blah.
At first, I thought you were talking about the other Wilson brother, which is in this, which he's one of the announcers along with Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Is it Andrew Wilson? He's Beef Supreme in I said it earlier, Idiocracy.
Oh, that guy. That guy's awesome.
Yeah. And that's the best name.
Very much so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I should share these, shouldn't I, Jamie? That's a good idea. I have that ability. I could have just done that, Cole. What am I doing?
Oh, I didn't see.
Okay.
Crap, I had a whole thing about his sketches. All I see him now is blabbing about actors. Rather long interview, so there's a lot on there.
So here's the actual shot from the film where Eli is sitting in front of the painting.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, we got to use that more so we can show people things.
Yeah,
we're talking with them. I always forget about it too. But that's pretty cool. Fuck, I've been reading this stupid long interview. And I can't find the part, but I know there's a part where he talks about his brother doing sketches, and that's like something he does whenever he starts off a movie.
And here's the other one.
Nice.
Isn't that weird? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, there must be some point to it, but I do not know.
I'm curious. Like I want to know who painted those, and look at some of their other work.
Yeah. Now I think I'm too far. It should be easy to see. I mean, all the questions are in bold, so it should be easy for me to see. I'm sure it was this page because it was done like conversationally. It wasn't like just reading an article or a paragraph. Blah, blah, blah. Asking about if they built any sets, the Magnificent Ambersons. Faded Glory. Yeah, that's the thing. Faded Glory. Oh, okay. Here we go. We see your hand stamp. We've seen your drawings, your sketches. You're one of the voices. But that's his own drawing and sketches. Because yeah, like his drawing and sketches are the Richie ones. But there was a whole thing about how like often when here we go. Did you do any sketches? Did your brother Eric? So his brother is Eric, and that's true. So Eric would often draw things like characters and locations and stuff, like when he's at the very start of coming up with an idea. So it's his brother Eric. I was trying to convince Gene to do the movie and had Eric draw this illustration that showed what all the actors would look like with Gene's character in the middle. I had a couple of people who were not actually cast in the film, but I sent him Eric's original artwork, which we shouldn't have done. We should have scanned it and sent him a good duplicate, because later I asked Gene twice if he could borrow that drawing, and I feared that he threw it in the trash. And they said he couldn't find it anyway. Well, yeah, I think I'm sure I read before in some other place, some other time, that yeah, like that's like one of the first things he does, like preliminary, is when he's first coming up with the idea for a movie. His brother sketches characters and places and things, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so we did Margot and we did Bill Murray mostly. So who we got left? Well, I guess Henry Sherman, which is Danny Glover. Once again, we got a character sort of playing against type. Danny Glover's usually a more dynamic guy, but this guy's a very reserved, polite, bookish fellow, and he's also kind of lame, in a way. There's that great part where he's with Etheline on one of her digs, because she later in life, after her children grew up, then she decided to have her own career, and she became an archaeologist. So they're at one of their like local digs in the city, and they're walking along, talking, having a nice discussion. And as they're walking, the camera, he accidentally drops down into like one of the trenches, and she keeps walking and doesn't know he's gone. And he's just like staggering out of the hole. It's pretty funny, because that's not what we're used to seeing from Danny Glover, even when he's older,
Right.
But it's interesting because I don't think he's been in any other movies, Wes Anderson movies since. I know he is getting older, of course. He's quite old now. But I don't know. He's just seemed to fit in so well.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's such a nerd too. He's like, he's an accountant or whatever. And he's so wrapped up in that like when he actually is asking her, when he's trying to propose to her, he like frames it in a question that's like within the context of accounting. She's like, this isn't really a bookkeeping issue, is it? He's like, no, I don't know why I phrased it that way. But you know why he phrased it that way, because that's his world. That's what he's good at. He's not great at like a romantic gesture or anything like that. But what he can talk about is his field. Things like that, like that's good writing, because it makes him seem like a real character to me. Even though all these characters have a tinge of, the magic realism we talk about that makes them a little bit different from real life, they still have these things that ground them. And I find that in Henry's character, that he's not like super shy and not at all confident. In fact, he's happy to stand up to he stands up to Royal when Royal tries to like insult him and sort of bully him a little. But he's still much more meek than we're used to seeing him. It's funny, too, in that same interview, there's something I hadn't thought of. So there's a few times in this movie where I guess Wes Anderson did his best to make little like allusions to like movies that some of his actors had been in, particularly like the one that's probably most prominent is the whole French Connection thing. There's some New York stuff that really lines up with that, which is a nod to Gene Hackman's career. But there's this part where Royal is looking out the window and he sees Eli escaping, and he realizes, that Eli has been in the room with Margot, and he yells, "I know, you asshole." Apparently that is an allusion to something involving Danny Glover, even though it's not Danny Glover in the film, in that in the movie Witness, where Danny Glover like attacks like Harrison Ford or something, Harrison Ford, and then runs away. Harrison Ford's character yells, "I know, you asshole," or something like that.
Oh,
so that was kind of a weird, like, a weird illusion because it involves different actors, but that's I guess what it's supposed to be from. There's even I only know this from that interview, and there's a part in the interview where they talk quite a little bit about Danny Glover and just the films he liked him in, and he mentioned how he liked him in Witness too, which is different because in Witness he's actually a bad guy. He's one of the assassins or whatever that's sent to kill the kid in Witness. I don't know. It's probably been a long time since you've seen it, but at the end, the whole thing, they have that thing where Harrison Ford like fights them off at the farm. Like Danny Glover's one of those guys, and he is quite interesting. And there's the part where like the witness is a little Amish kid, and they're trying to describe what he looks like. And he points at the black detective, and he's like, "Oh, he was a black guy." Yeah, it's like, but a big man, because the detective's actually quite small. It's kind of unintentionally funny, this kid trying to describe a large black man. Amish kid that had probably never seen a black man before. And speaking of Amish, that's the other thing. So when we get the details, some of the details filled in about Margot's mysterious past, one is that she ran away from home, or actually she was at boarding school, and she ran away from boarding school when she was 14 because she wanted to track down her real family, her birth family. And when she finds them, they're like a bunch of like Amish or Mennonites or something like that. And that's how she loses part of one of her fingers, which we've seen.
What the hell is going on?
It's funny too, but she,
like, why did
I don't know, but they're asking her to like, well, by accident. He just wanted her to line up the wood. He was supposed to split the wood or something.
Yeah, but
it's funny. He's like, "There you go, Sister Maggie. Just get it up there." And she's like looking at them like, whatever, and smoking her cigarette. It's funny because you see she really wound up in the right place, because like you couldn't think of a worse place for her than her actual biological family, right? A person like her would suffocate in that kind of environment, and she kind of hit the jackpot and got to go, live the life she's got. This, this wonderful place to be a creative person. This nice big house with all these books and things, and the house is so great. Remember that part? A couple times he has the secret meetings with Pagoda in the little closet that has all the games. Oh, I love that. All the different board games and stuff. So many. My house has a ton of those too. Some people collect them. I mean, if anybody wanted to, we have a bunch.
They go for a lot of money too if you have some of the older ones.
Yeah. The problem is, as like most people, like I have a lot of the older ones, but they're not complete, right? Stuff's missing. Is the problem.
Always. That's the way my kids are, and they lose every damn thing. It's like, God, let's have one nice thing.
Exactly. I know. I'd probably go crazy because I mean, one of my big regrets as an adult is like I had a lot of cool things as a kid that I didn't take good enough care of, or things like that. I didn't have the foresight, and I regret it. So I always think if I have kids, I'll make sure their stuff stays. But you can't, right? You can't control that. You can't control that. So it's not like my parents did anything wrong. They're like, you wanted to play with it, we let you play with it, and I mean that's what you got to do. You don't want to be some jerk just saying, "Oh, don't bend it, don't break it." But it is true, try not to lose the stuff.
I was trying to find a game. I ordered. Do you remember Domino Rally? Do you ever remember that?
Yes.
And it's not around anymore. I don't think you can find knockoff stuff.
That's like the first time. Like I haven't heard that in like decades.
You remember the commercials? They would run the commercials all the time, and like I never had it. But it's really cool, and I got a lot of it for my kids off eBay for relatively good prices. And then we watched this movie. Annabelle Comes Home, the latest Annabelle film.
I've seen it.
Not a great film, but you remember the game they play is Feely Mealy.
I don't think I know that one.
Yeah, I don't either. I wasn't familiar with it, but it's a real game, and I looked it up, and it's like, hundreds of dollars to get one on eBay.
Even though we had a lot of those games, I don't even know why, because I was never a big fan. It must have been more my sister than me. But the one I wanted, we never got was Mousetrap, right? Everybody loves Mousetrap with its crazy, elaborate thing. We never had it.
Neither.
But we had some really weird, absurd ones that never had commercials.
I had Dizzy Dizzy Dinosaur was a fun one.
Got it.
Did
It's
you
in
have
this
that one?
house. Unless
Yeah, that's
well,
awesome,
unless,
man.
like I said, about 10 years ago we had a flood, so some things might have been lost in the flood. It's hard. I don't know. Like that damn Ninja Turtles case I had. Damn, like when I was last here back in June, I tore the place apart looking for it. And my parents were no help at all. They didn't even seem to remember it existed. I'm like, you kidding me? My grandfather gave it to me. Even had a note and everything. You guys don't remember? But anyway.
Yeah,
One thing I am going to do here, I dragged my huge VCR home, so I'm going to go through some tapes.
Did you ever play Fireball Island?
Sounds familiar.
I had that one. You can get it for
The
the
problem
cool
is a
price.
lot of the games even I have. Oh, sorry.
So you get it for the cool price of $269 on eBay.
Nice.
Let's
The
see what
problem
Dizzy
is
Dizzy
a
Dinosaur
lot of the
is
games
for.
we have, I don't remember their names. Like even stuff we have complete down in the basement here, I don't remember their names. Like one was like, it was pretty generic. It was just like one of those ones where you just have to get through the map fast. You roll the dice, and it was like a space one. Though you know, you would land on a comet or a planet or a black hole, and you had various cards. It had a weird name, like the title was like X, like start with an X or something. It was just about getting somebody home. Really weird one. Do you remember? Here's an interesting one. We have one called "Don't Break the Ice."
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah, where it was like white cubes that would like, but you had to make your way across without falling through. We had that. Trouble, which is a very popular one. We got Trouble.
Is it a Perfection, the one that had the timer and they would all pop out if you didn't get them?
Yeah, I never owned that, but I played it. I played it at other people's houses. Snakes and Ladders. Sometimes it shoots and ladders, depending upon. I think we have a couple different Snakes and Ladders ones. But anyway, I should have paused it to look at more of the titles. There's a few times in the movie where the camera's moving and you can't pause it that well because there's a part where, so of course, when this movie starts, Royal has been living at a hotel. He's been living at the Waldorf or whatever it's called. Actually, it's the Waldorf in real life. It's called something else in the movie. Anyway, he's been living there for 22 years. He's been living there since the 78. And of course, what kicks off the action is like, I guess his income is dried up and he can't stay there anymore. But there's a scene later when he has to move out for good, where the camera pans across the room when they're going to kick him out, and he has a whole bunch of law books, but he also has a whole bunch of spy novels. But the camera is moving so fast, if you pause it, you don't actually get to really make out anything because I tried, and it's just sort of blurry. But they went to the trouble. He's got dozens of spy novels, and I really wanted to look at some of the titles and see if I recognized any. But
at one point when they're in Eli's house, it's a shot that has like a stack of pornos in the foreground, and I didn't even realize those were pornos till I thought those were board games also. So I saw Big Booty something or whatever it was called.
It's funny. But yeah, I think creating sets and stuff for his movies would be so fun. Just all the details, memories of your own childhood mixed in with other things. Like, I know we talked about it in Moonrise Kingdom, because Moonrise Kingdom, the family lives in that cool house. And a lot of the stuff the family does in that reminds me of my own childhood, even though, that's 30 years later, because the movie's set in 65. So I'm talking late 80s, early 90s. But I did a lot of the same similar things. I know we've harped on this quite a bit, but just because of our age, we're part of the generation that still did fairly old-fashioned stuff, and we were the ones that kind of jumped into, because we had video games, and
we saw both sides of it.
Yeah, we saw both sides of it, because I mean, just like they did in that, because one thing that was so much like my house growing up in that movie is like, you'd have like a rainy Sunday or something, like a rare day where we're not going anywhere, nothing's going on. And like, yeah, maybe I'm down in the basement doing something. My sister's in her room doing something. We're all and of course, I was a kid. I watched TV. Yeah, but I mean, I did do other things. It wasn't always TV, and I mean inside, because we talked about this too. Kids don't go outside anymore. It was pretty good because like even on an inside day, it wasn't always TV and video games. There could be something else that I could occupy myself with, and I don't just mean books or comics. there's that part in the start of the movie where he's listening to the record. Like I did a lot of that, where I had a Fisher Price record player, still here, still works, that I played all sorts of stuff on and listened to. I think I already showed you this there, you and Eric, but this is still in the bedroom here, so it's funny.
Awesome. Looking at Dizzy Dinosaur.
So I grew up with a lot of these, little books that were about movies, and you play it along. For some reason, pretty much every movie that was made from '84 I have, and here's The Last Starfighter.
Oh man, I used to love those.
There's the record.
Oh man.
But looking at this thing here, I had. Let's see. Oh man, I would have killed to have the Dark Crystal, man. But yeah, okay. But the last two, this I don't know what number this is, but at 465 and 466 at the bottom of the list here, you can't read it. Other movies from '84 are Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins. As I said, that was my introduction to Gremlins. I didn't really see Gremlins as a little kid, but I knew it because I used to listen to the book. I used to read the book and listen to it. What's funny is like the audio doesn't even line up right. Like they don't even take it from the movie because I know what Harrison Ford sounds like, and it's not Harrison Ford doing it. So it's not lines from the movie. And there's even lines that aren't in it. I always quote it sometimes too. There's that part early in Temple of Doom where after they've left Shanghai and they're flying in the plane in the mountains, but the pilots bail out on them, right? And the whole thing comes where they have to like jump out of the plane with the raft and they go down the mountain. So you're in that part where they're just now finding out that the pilots have bailed. And then there's a line that Indy says that he never says in the movie, where it's like he's like where I think it's like Willie, because she sucks, right? She's like about to like faint or something, and he like grabs her. And in the book, he goes, "Don't conk out on us, doll. We need your help," which is not something he ever said in the movie, but it's just a funny line. But yeah, all three movies from '84 I've got. Read Long Adventure. I don't really remember listening to this one, but the other two I listen to all the time. And I probably have more, but I don't recognize the other ones off the list. But some really good ones. But the Dark Crystal would have been the best. But there's even a couple of the unofficial Star Wars ones. There's Droid World and The Ewoks Join the Fight. I bet you those go for something. Yeah, but this record's a bit dirty, but I still like it's by Buena Vista Records. But that's the one that's up in my old bedroom here. The others are probably still down in the basement with the Fisher Price record player. But anyway, I veered way off point. But yeah, the beginning of that movie, just when they show the kids doing various stuff in the house, whether they're reading or listening to records and stuff, it reminds me a lot of days like that in my own childhood where, yeah, I know, I definitely did watch TV. I definitely did play video games, but there was other stuff I did too. Nowadays, like everything kids do indoors is totally screen oriented. It's a movie or a show or a game, or it's something on a tablet.
Right.
It's all screens, and it's not like we're anti-screen. I love video games. I still do. They're a big part of my life. But yeah, it's nice sometimes just to know that, like, as a kid, you have other options. There's other cool things you can do. But yeah, I just love all the stuff they put in the Wes Anderson films, and this one is no exception. All the great all the great sets and locations. Trying to think what else we got. It's interesting too how one set that was built was the tennis place. Like they made that from scratch. That wasn't like a real tennis court or anything. They made that somewhere.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like it would be easier to just record at a real tennis?
I know, because they had to like use like all these, I don't know, like feet of, I don't know what they did to make the ground, but it was a lot. It was a lot of work that the crew had to do. But I know that the ship was just was actually like a Navy ship or something that was docked in New York at the time. They got to go on that. Something else was done on the ship, I think, which is weird. Like, maybe I'm mixing that up. I read so much stuff beforehand and now there's stuff. Let's see. The Waldorf Astoria was used for the hotel scenes. Oh, yeah. Central Park Zoo was used for a shot of the rainforest. Because remember, there's a really quick flash of her like in Papua New Guinea making out with the warrior. So that's actually at the Central Park Zoo, standing in for the rainforest. Easily enough accomplished. What else we got? United States Navy training ship represented Ritchie's ship. Here it is. The crew also added 10,000 square feet of AstroTurf at Forest Hill to depict Richie's tennis match. Yeah, like, wouldn't it be easier just to find a tennis court and shoot on it? I mean, is it going to cost so much? Here's the other thing that annoyed me about this that I read in this and that is how greedy people in like New York and stuff are. So there's this scene. Remember the scene where he first shows up and tells Ethylene that he's dying? And remember, she gets so upset that first he takes it back, and then she freaks out on him. He goes, "No, I really am dying." Right? That's just out on a sidewalk, right? But where they shot it, the people in, I'm trying to remember how it worked. There's something about the way they shot it, where they were. There were windows that would reflect the film crew, so they needed to like not have that. They needed the windows changed or something like that. And to do that, they needed the homeowners to agree. The homeowners only agreed if they paid them a bunch of money, which of course they didn't do. And what they did was it had something to do with they like stacked a mattress up somewhere to like block out light or something. I can't remember, but it's part of the thing. But I read that in the interview. And then there was another thing was, that hawk, Mordecai,
Right.
At one point during filming, the hawk flew kind of far away and somebody in New Jersey caught it and refused to give it back to them, and again demanded money, even though like how could they? And so all they did was replace the hawk. Like, how does that person have real legal recourse? It's stealing, isn't it? But I mean, that
absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, they said they would. They said they'd only give it back. As shooting continued, As shooting continued, the bird used for Mordecai was caught by a citizen of New Jersey who demanded a price for its return. It was replaced instead by one more white in color.
Which explains why the white on Mordecai in the film.
Yeah. Although it really makes sense, too, because to me it just shows like he's aged, right?
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, Royal says, you must be molting.
Yeah. Then later, I think Margot says, like, sometimes if a person has a traumatic experience, their hair will turn white, and maybe something like that happened to him. But that was one of the only parts of the movie that doesn't flow for me, because it's one of the few times where when you jump from another scene, it feels weird. Okay, so we'll go back. So Richie has gone to that hotel where now, after being kicked out and everything, so that he won't go completely broke, remember, Royal and Pagoda have now become elevator operators or bellhops at that hotel, right? Remember, Richie goes and meets him, and then he's riding in the hotel. He's riding up the elevator with him. But then it cuts to them on the roof of the townhouse. At first, I thought they were just on the roof of the hotel to talk. But then Mordecai comes sailing in, and you realize, okay, Mordecai wouldn't come to the hotel. He came to the house. That actually confused me for a few seconds. That actually seemed kind of like a abrupt scene change, because it shows them literally going up in an elevator, and the next shot of them is on a roof. But it's not the roof of the building of the elevator. They're now back at the townhouse because that's where Mordecai's going. So that's one of the very few complaints I have about the movie. Not that it's a big one. Yeah. Where I was just confused for a few seconds. And then I figured, oh, no, they're back at the house now. That's kind of weird because, I don't know, I guess logically you expect if you see people going up in an elevator, if the next shot they're on a roof, you figure it's probably the roof of the building that contained the elevator. But that's not actually the case in that scene. Well, let's see if I can find. There's this whole stupid thing. I don't even know what the people thought they should get money for. If it was something about putting something in front of their window or what, but I don't know. Something really stupid.
That is stupid.
You're talking about long takes and things, and okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to read. I'm probably gonna read more than is needed, but I don't want to cut off context, so I'll just do this quickly. So here's a question: are you able to see a whole movie in your head, how it ought to be, cuts and everything? Some directors put it together in the editing room. I mean, everybody has to edit, but you don't strike me as somebody who is just. And then he cuts them off. He goes, "No, I usually have a pretty good idea. I could definitely think up a way that a particular scene can be shot and cut in advance. Doing Fantastic Mr. Fox was a situation where I could think it up, and that's what we did. But shooting live action, especially on location, can complicate those ideas. So to elaborate, he says, usually you may have an idea of how it ought to be done, but you may not know the location. So it just ends up having nothing to do with what you planned. Actors do something unexpected, they surprise you, which changes the idea, or a question comes into the equation, or the space is just different from what you planned, and you're going to have to deal with it differently. Or there's something about the space that makes you change your plans. In the Royal Tenenbaums, I remember there's a scene where we had it figured out for ages. On the day of shooting, these people would not. Their window was reflecting, and then he interjects, "What scene is this?" It's the scene where Gene Hackman gets swatted by Angelica Houston. He's telling her, "I'm dying. I'm not dying. I'm dying." And anyway, this house they're supposed to talk in front of, they wouldn't let us do anything to make it so the window wasn't going to reflect directly into the camera. They wanted to charge us a lot of money for that. I ended up saying, "Do we control this part of the sidewalk here?" "Yes, we control that." "Can we lean a mattress against this tree and we'll block that whole part there?" "Yes, we can do that." So then we do the scene. Gene comes out and he stops behind the mattress and you can't see him. I said, "Gene, is there a way to do it so you're not hidden behind the mattress?" I feel the seething begin. He says, "Move the mattress." "Well, see, Gene, these people will not let us do the scene. If you can find a way, what I'm thinking is that you can just kind of use this mattress as your entrance." I thought I was going to get socked in the face. He made it work with the staging of that it was completely dictated by the people at the window. I mean, what kind of asshole people are these? You're going to charge all these people money so that you put something in your window so it doesn't cause a reflection? Like, Jesus, people. Like, they're not shooting on your property. I can understand if somebody's saying, you're going to shoot on my property, I expect you're going to pay me something. They're not shooting on your property. They're asking, like, if your place in the background, you can do one little tiny thing. You're like, "No, pay us money." People make me sick, man.
I don't know. Everyone's looking for a handout, I guess.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to blackmail them for the Hawk is even worse.
Oh, it's so much worse. Because, I mean, in that, I don't even get it. Isn't it their property? It's like, I caught your hawk, and now it's mine unless you pay a ransom? Like, I don't know. That bothers me. Anyway, there's probably other stuff we can come back to that I'm forgetting about. But I'll talk about something now because it's occurred to me, speaking of the hawk. And it's one problem I have with Wes Anderson is I don't understand exactly what his feelings are for animals, particularly pets. Because he kills them in movies. A lot. Like, you can't have a movie where he doesn't kill one, which is weird. I realize there's something about losing a pet and the emotional impact it can have, but sometimes it's just so callous. One of the things I like about Life Aquatic is that finally this doesn't happen. Although what does happen is similar, because there's a part where after they escape the island so after the pirates attack them and steal the Bond Company stooge, the pirates had their own dog, and the pirates had a 3-legged dog. But then they're like, "You forgot your dog." So they basically take the dog, and they take the dog in. But then when they stage the rescue on the island to get the Bond Company stooge back, they forget the dog. And they're like, "We going to go back?" And they're like, "No." And they just leave the dog. But that's not horrible. The dog won't necessarily die or be killed or anything like that, right? But in all his other movies, he feels like he has to kill animals. And I don't know why it's necessary. We did for this channel, we did Moonrise Kingdom. And there's a part where when the other Boy Scouts are trying to recapture the Boy Scout that has run away with the girl, and they have their violent fight, we don't actually see it, but we see in the aftermath, the fucking dog gets killed by an arrow, by accident. But what does it add? Why is it in there? And there's just a weird part where he's just like, "Those bastards," right through the neck. And she's just like, "Was he a good dog?" And he goes, "Who's to say?" Like, what? like I don't understand people's the callous killing of the animals and also people's reaction to it. And of course, this movie ends with the wedding scene, which is going to take place at the house. And Eli is showing up, and he's all dressed up in the proper suit like everybody's wearing, but he's also got his face painted all up, and he's high on crazy drugs, and he drives in, and of course, he crashes into the house of the car, narrowly missing Chaz's sons, who are saved by Royal, but their dog Buckley is killed. And I mean, the kids care, and other people care. I don't know. It's just weird. Like, at least there's some dignity there, because it's told in the narration that Royal buries him. They actually give him burial, and they say a few words. They say a prayer and stuff. So that's something. But it comes back to the main thing. My main problem with the movie And I'm not one of those people that says, oh, they should cut it out or anything like that. I'm not saying you should, oh, this isn't PC, so cut it out of the movie. I don't mean that. But I honestly would like the movie better if it didn't have two scenes of Royal taking children to a dogfight. Like, I don't care what era it was from. I don't think it's funny. And there's a part where, because in the original prologue, when they're talking about how he favored Richie and took him to all these places, it shows he and Richie had it. Then later, he repeats the same thing with Chaz's sons. And then when he sees blood on one of the kids, he goes, oh, that's just dog's blood. Like, that's not funny to me. Like, that's really upsetting that these kids are being taught, like, to love blood sport of dogs. That bothers me.
It's played for laughs, though, isn't it? I mean,
I know it's played for laughs. It just doesn't work for me, is all I'm saying. And I realize, it's just myself. Because I'm not saying, oh, you can't have that in a movie. Because you know what? I've seen jokes about murder in a movie that I think are fine, jokes about rape that I think are fine, jokes about child molestation even that I think are fine. So I'm not saying anything's off limits. I guess it's just how you do it. I don't know, though. So that's the other reason why I get really mad about the dog dying at the end, too. And I just don't understand what is his thing about killing animals? Another thing that's played for laughs is the villain in, the Grand Budapest Hotel, played by Adrian Brody, is he literally tosses cats out the window to their death. At least I get that. He's a bad guy, But other times animals are just dying, and I don't understand the sense of it and why it's like it's a requirement for his movies, and it bothers me. Because I don't understand what he's trying to say or do. He's trying to evoke an emotional response, obviously, but it almost seems like Wes Anderson is saying, like, I personally don't care about animals, but it's funny to me to see you people freak out about them.
I feel like it's the exact opposite. I feel like he's probably an animal lover. I mean, it's the dark comedy aspect. You can laugh at death. You can laugh at dog fights because it's not real. He doesn't show footage of dog fights. He shows their reaction to it.
I know exactly. Well, like I said, sometimes when things are so absurd, then obviously I'll laugh at them. For instance, there's this episode of South Park, right? Well, it's the one where they go to the water park and everything turns into pee. But there's this part where they, as usual, making fun of sort of the scientific community, there's this whole part where they seal off the water park and say nobody can go inside because, like, the pee will make you go crazy. Like, how do you know that? It's like, well, of course, we've done scientific testing, and the scientists show that, like, they have test monkeys, and they're peeing on the monkeys' faces, and the monkeys freak out. They just piss on the monkey's faces, and then he's like, oh, look, see, they get all agitated and freaked out, see? And then, like, when they get really freaked out, they take out a gun and blow the monkey's head off. Obviously, if that was real, it would be horrific. But the whole point is, it's so ridiculous, right? Yeah. Scientists pissing in a monkey's face, and then when it becomes agitated, they blow its head off with a handgun. It's so ridiculous that, of course, I can laugh at it because it would never happen in real life. But I mean, I guess I find this tougher because, like, dog fighting is a real thing that has existed and does exist. And I just don't really like the idea of, like, I love the idea of him corrupting the sons. I guess just not to that point. Because they're, at one point he's got them jaywalking, he's got them shoplifting, he's got them throwing water balloons, and all that's fun. I just don't think dogfighting fits into the same. I don't think dogfighting is a fun scamp activity the way the other stuff is. It bothers me. And again, I'm not going to say, oh, they should cut it out, or, when they stream this movie, it shouldn't be in there. No, leave it all in if that's the movie. But it's never sat well with me. No, I understand the intent. It just doesn't land for me. And the fact that he just has this history of showing animals getting offed in movies just really made me wonder what his problem is.
So you're saying we should cancel Wes Anderson?
If I'm saying anything, that's absolutely what I'm saying. And all of his movies need to be edited appropriately. But no, it's just something I've wondered about. Because it's a pattern. If it was just in this movie, whatever.
Here's an article. The reason why Wes Anderson loves killing animals in his films.
And I'm sure I read this article at one point, because I remember reading at least one article about it a few years ago.
He says, I was thinking of it in Berlin, and I feel like they say, why do you kill animals? Well, we didn't kill animals. These are actors. We feel like, well, what actor doesn't want a death scene anyway? If I was a cat, I would say, I would love it if you kill me in this one. I have a great way I'm going to do this, so I feel like I'm going to do this. I feel like I'm doing a favor to these animals. Have you seen Isle of Dogs? That's another one I haven't seen.
I keep putting it off. Maybe because I'm afraid of what will happen to the dogs.
I'm pretty sure dogs die in that one too.
That one I can understand though, because most of the characters are dogs. So
Right.
maybe on their quest or something, some dogs die. So in that case, I'm not going to be like, oh, there he goes killing dogs again. Because I mean, if most of the characters are dogs and they're going on an adventure, I can understand it. I just mean every time he kills animals in these things, it has nothing to do with the plot. He just throws it in. I guess that's why it bothers me. If it has something to do with the plot, but it doesn't. I mean, think about Buckley. Buckley survived a fucking plane crash, and then he gets taken out by a car. I think that sucks.
Yeah, I agree.
But no, it doesn't make me hate Wes Anderson or anything. It just makes me wonder. Because, yeah, if you have a death of any character, whether it's an animal or a human, if it's part of the plot, then fine. But these just seem not at all needed. I mean, if you took them out, it wouldn't really change anything. I mean, I guess they wanted to have some real consequences, I guess. For this movie, I'll say maybe they just wanted some real consequences for the car crash. It's like, okay, we can't have him kill the kids, because then there's no happy ending for anybody. But, we have to have something happen. So they lose their dog, which is part of growing up. But again, it just seems they already lost their goddamn mother. Now they have to have their dog killed right in front of them.
Fuck. They're about to get a Dalmatian. They're about to get a Dalmatian.
Yeah. That's another charming thing about the house, is that the house has the descendants of the Dalmatian mice that was invented by Chaz. His first real business venture was when he was a kid, was he bred these Dalmatian mice, white with black spots, that he sold to a pet shop. And I like the idea that the house still has their descendants running around in it. It adds a little more character to a house that's already brimming with character and all sorts of cool things. I did see you earlier, Jamie, when you said a thing about the tent. I love the tent that gets set up in the room on the 4th floor that Richie hangs out in. And it has something that I still don't have to this day. I don't know why, even though it's always been a priority. So he's got a light up globe. Someday I'm going to finally get that fucking light up globe. And there's literally like a globe and lamp store downtown in Halifax that I've been to that I'm sure has that. Just haven't been there in so long. I'll have to check it out. But yeah, I still really badly want to light a map. That's another thing that's in a lot of his movies is like, besides like, I think that's another thing that's cool is like in a lot of movies, especially when you're showing, say, like a kid's room and you're evoking time, you'll have like posters of Farrah Fawcett for the 70s, or I don't know, or some actor or some sports hero or something like that. I like how most of his stuff, it sort of has an academic bend to it, because that's what a lot of his characters are. So that's where you get things like a map or something, or a specialized map or a globe, or or maybe something of the solar system. I like stuff like that because I had a blend, because I had the sports stuff, but I also had stuff like that in my room too. I like that a lot of his movies, I guess that's one of the main reasons I like the movies, is his movies usually deal with sort of creative, artistic people a lot of the time. I mean, maybe I'm not much of one, but I do identify as one. And if I have something in common with the characters, I was never a prodigy, that's for sure. But I showed a lot of promise in early life that I definitely didn't live up to. So at least I have that. I have that to relate to.
I mean, obviously I was not a prodigy either, but I was into learning, and like I was just craving knowledge all the time. And remember when, like in school, you were kind of like a nerd if you like to learn or if you like school.
Oh God, yes. And it's worse now.
Yeah, it's worse now, but it's like,
I mean, I hate to go on. Yeah.
You're going to be changing oil and I'm going to go on to a career, like, fuck. Well, I mean, oh, you fucking nerd, whatever, but I don't get it.
Yeah. And I hate to think, but it's only gotten worse now. The society's gotten even more shallow.
Yeah. Well, I was always like, my parents would take me places. We'd always go to museums and stuff.
Yeah, same here. This room is empty right now, but this room would have had quite a few really expensive, like dinosaur books. We go to a museum, we go to the gift shop, and I'd be like, I want this. And my parents look at it, it'd be like $40 or something, but they'd get it because they're like, well, educational, and he's into it.
Exactly.
So, I got a lot of stuff like that. All the shelves are mostly empty.
My siblings are quite a bit older than I am, so it was kind of like I was a single, an only child for a good bit of my life, but a good bit of my childhood. But they take me on vacation. We'd always go to art museums, which I've been into art since I was very young, and never been to the Met. That's one of my bucket list. I don't like that expression, but my bucket list.
Well, that's one of the
items.
things I didn't get to do when I was in New York, because I didn't get to. We just didn't. There wasn't really time to do any museums, which obviously my mother and I both would have liked to have seen. But I did. The Waldorf. It's funny. The hotel that he's staying at in real life is the Waldorf Astoria. I did briefly walk in it, so I was actually in it, in like the lobby of it for a few minutes. As I said, the hotel we actually stayed is the hotel that is featured in the film Made in Manhattan.
Well, that's good to know.
It's a nice hotel. I mean, it's kind of like the Waldorf. It's got that retro style, which again is perfect for the movie, right? He's in a hotel that looks like it's frozen in time. It might as well still be the 60s. The bellhops have the old-fashioned suits, even with the hats and everything. You've got the elevator operators. Here's something that's kind of funny is, remember Dusty? Dusty was the original elevator operator. He gets Dusty to pose as the doctor. It's one of the better jokes at the end. So and that's the other thing about how good his style is technically is, of course, the aftermath of the car crash is basically the camera sweeping from the left to the right with no cuts. It's just one long shot showing the various people in the aftermath of the crash. And sometimes people come from earlier, because at one point, you have Raleigh and he's talking to the priest after the priest is getting loaded into the ambulance. And then later, Raleigh has moved further down, and he's on the fire truck. I love that. And what is it? What's his name? What's the kid's name? Dudley. Dudley puts the hat on him. He's like, "You look great." I don't even know why that's funny. Sometimes stuff is just funny without even... Although I will say, in the earlier scene with the chase scene, I lose it every time he knocks that priest down the stairs.
Oh, man. I was going to say, that's dark comedy right there.
Ben Stiller just in his rage, just knocking an elderly priest down the stairs. And it's and you see the whole thing, right? The stunt guys going dum, 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 down the stairs.
I love it.
It's funny, and there's just a great bits of comedy in that, even in that short chase, because just before he goes outside, when he's just trying to find an exit, and he accidentally runs into the kitchen. Pagoda's there with some of the staff, and Pagoda has some I don't know what it is. It's like an appetizer or something. It's like, "Here, try this. It's really good." So he grabs it and then runs outside. It's so good. Yeah, but anyway,
so much going on, man. So much.
That's just I just love that it's just the camera slowly panning over as we see all the different people, all one shot, everybody hitting their marks, everybody delivering. It's so satisfying.
Yeah, you mentioned the guy that poses as the doctor,
right? That's what I was going to get to. Yeah, so you can say it.
He's there at the end, and Richie, got elbowed in the face by Chaz, and he's looking at his, he's in his doctor garb again, and he says it's minor cornea
damage.
Something.
Yeah.
He's like, the other eye. Let me know.
As if that's a real thing.
Right.
You get hit in the eye, and there's a possibility it'll happen to the other eye. Yeah. So I love that he's kind of bought into his doctor character. It's like, now I'm just going to be a pretend doctor because I kind of like it. Yeah. It's such a funny, just extra joke thrown in there. I love it.
You mentioned Dudley, and I really think Dudley kind of steals the show. He has a handful of lines, but they're so hilarious every time. Like when the gypsy cab shows up.
Dudley's always there to bring light. If something sort of heavy or dark has happened, we suddenly have Dudley, and of course Dudley's the one who finds Richie, right? When Richie is attempting suicide, which is and that's another perfect example, because that's the darkest part of the movie, right? We have this guy who's attempted suicide, his wrists are all slashed open, and it's very disturbing and real. And then you've got Dudley showing up, and he's covered in blood, and they're like, "Where is he?" And he's like, "Who? Where's who?"
Yeah, Margot. Yeah,
talking
to Margot.
Yeah, and actually, the very last Dudley joke is my favorite, which is when they show in the epilogue that he writes the book about him, and he goes on a tour of various universities, and they're there, and somebody's like, "Can the boy tell time?" And Ronnie just was, "Oh my good Lord, no." That's my favorite joke in the whole thing for Dudley. I don't know why. It's just no, God, no, he can't tell time. Jesus, no. And Dudley just goes, "Yeah, no."
Yeah, I like when Riley's trying to diagnose him, and he comes in from the other room. He's like, "I'm colorblind."
Yeah, because one of the things he mentions, just to add to the absurdity of the scene, is he's really far away, right? But he says he's got really acute sense of hearing. So even though he's way down the hall from him, he hears it, and he goes, "I'm colorblind too," and he's like, "I'm afraid so." Yeah, they say he has like a mixture of dyslexia, amnesia, and color blindness.
So Jamie mentions the suicide scene was disturbing. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Like, it's really impressive how well Luke Wilson delivers on that moment, how serious and somber it is, and how he really seems convincing of just the pain that you see in his face when he's looking in the mirror. And you got the Elliott. I think that's an Elliott Smith song playing.
It is, yeah. And Elliott Smith killed himself by stab wounds? How in the hell do you
something really weird, yeah.
Like, I didn't even know Elliott Smith was dead.
Yeah, every note of music, just like everything we see in the background, every note of music is like planned and thought out. And I'm not saying other movies, plenty of movies plan their music, but few do it with quite the intricate details. This, and I mean, it all lands so well. The Van Morrison song at the very end when they're leaving his funeral, like just everyone. That's what it's called, everyone. I think Van Morrison has recently revealed himself to be like a moron. I think he's written songs about like how oppressed people are because they can't have gatherings and wear masks or something. Some stupid something like that. I think it's Van Morrison. If I'm wrong, I apologize because I don't want to smear his name, but I'm pretty sure it is him. I think he was like, at some gathering in like Ireland or wherever, and he had like actually written a song about like how terrible it was that the government told them that they couldn't have gatherings or some bullshit. It's like, oh man, don't ruin your music for me. Just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I always hate when musicians get into that lane, politics or whatever,
Yeah. Their king is Bono.
Oh, yeah. They're environmentalists.
I mean, the Bono's so insufferable is the fact that I often agree with a lot of his points of views and causes, but I still can't stand the man, right?
Yeah,
because he's just so full of himself. I mean, we should have known from the very start. He named himself Bono, which means good voice. It's not like somebody else called him that. That was his nickname. No, he came up with it himself. And then his guitarist is like, well, I'm the Edge.
Yeah, I was about to say that. You beat me to
it. Beat that, motherfucker.
You be Bono. I'll be the Edge. We'll be so cool.
Yeah. One of the last shows we did, they're the most popular band that I don't really understand their popularity. I don't dislike them. I don't think they're bad, but I've never understood why at certain points in their career they were the biggest band, like the top, like the most. It doesn't hit for me. Like I don't hate it, but anyway, I know one of the recent shows we were talking about Dana Carvey. I remember one of his stand-up specials. He's talking about like how weird it was that like Sting basically gave himself the name Sting. He's just like, from now on, fellas, could you just call me Sting? I'm like, fuck off.
Sting or like Odorous Orungus.
That's a good one.
But I don't think they actually went by those names in real life, and I'm pretty sure Sting probably did. Bono definitely goes by that. It's Mr. Bono to you.
I'm sure it's Sir Bono, probably, right?
Sir, yes. Has he been knighted?
I don't know, but he definitely has been in his own mind.
Of course he has been. They're not any kind of idiot nowadays.
I know. It means pretty much nothing.
Yeah, me too, Jamie. Jamie's a big Tool fan as well.
Oh, yeah? Speaking of people that are annoying, I thought Maynard was really annoying when I saw A Perfect Circle.
Oh, really?
But their set was really great. And this was A Perfect Circle in 2000, so this is when they were brand new. It's pretty cool.
That may have been, I was able to see them. I've never seen Tool live, but I did see Perfect Circle back then.
Yeah, no, I never saw Tool live either.
Their first album. I was so far away, I couldn't even see Maynard. So,
what's funny is like I don't think I'd seen him before, like even on TV. Like I don't even think I knew what he looked at. Like I was kind of surprised. I think he was shirtless for most of the performance, and his hair was long and colored blonde.
So,
And I think he was wearing, and I think he really was wearing the Rockstar leather pants. I think he was.
I believe it.
Which I'm not gonna shit on. It works for some people.
Doesn't say Bono's been knighted on the Wikipedia, so I don't think he has been.
Wow, he must feel incredibly slighted. I don't know. He's from Ireland. For all I know, he has like a bunch of contempt for the crown. I have no idea. Irish have different opinions on that, right? A lot of people think that in the next few years, the UK is going to break up. That Brexit fucked it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if you got an email from Amazon, but Cameron posted that it's really going to change the way things are shipping from Amazon from the UK when it takes place January 1.
That's interesting. Well, I don't have any Arrow DVDs coming in, so I'll be okay.
I haven't ordered anything from Amazon UK in years.
I'm just trying to think, what else can we circle back to? I mean, I think we've mostly gotten into the things that we think are really good and make them films so memorable. And as we said, it has that timelessness, though, that, it just ages really well, right? Like, there's nothing really dated. The only thing that's dated about it is you can say, oh, remember when this actor was this age or something. But, I mean, beyond that, the movie has a certain timelessness feel, like most of his do. Because either they're outright period pieces, like Moonrise Kingdom, or there's something like this that is set in present day but has a very sort of retro feel and uses a lot of analog stuff, which is really, and actually, a lot of directors do that now, but they weren't doing that then. But I mean, that also has to do just with the timing, right? Because I mean, showing analog stuff in the 90s wasn't necessarily retro. There was a lot of analog stuff in the 90s, but to a certain point, I think it's become a problem with horror directors, because all anybody who's a horror director now wants to do is like pay homage to the golden age of like 70s and 80s. That's why, like, when you watch a movie like It Follows, everything in that is like so weird. Like, they're watching like big old TV sets that sit on the floor. They're driving 40-year-old cars from the 70s, but they're using like cell phones. It's such a weird.
Well, it's not exactly a cell phone. It's like some sort of it almost looks like a makeup like compact.
Yeah, I remember the one. She had it looked like a pearl, not a pearl, like an oyster clam shell or something. Exactly. I remember that. But I just mean, you do see some things of like newer technology, but they mix in the old. And the only reason they do that is because they're directors, they really want to pay up. They really want to like remind you of the old classics, which is fine. But I just mean, there's nothing wrong with making a horror movie that's completely in the now.
Yeah, you just always got the problem of everyone has a cell phone now, so you would just call for help. So what's fucking up with cell phones?
Sure.
Was the Strangers, whatever the new Strangers movie was, came out a couple years ago. It was they stole all the cell phones. Yeah. So
yeah, but I just mean, beyond even logistics, it's just, the visual aesthetic, right? They want to have sort of like this retro analog type feel. It's a big deal in a lot of movies to show people like taking like a tape and like sticking it in and flipping it up, and playing it. Because there is, and that is something I've admitted, you've asked me with the appeal of vinyl. That's one thing I like about vinyl is there's the ritual to it. You take the record out, you put it on, and you put the needle down. There's something very satisfying about doing that. I mean, it's great that now we can just push a button and we play an MP3. That's good, but there is something satisfying about how you play a record.
Yeah, I've just never. I still can't understand why the sound quality is so much better on a vinyl than versus something else.
I don't think it's better. There's just certain people that do. I don't think it's better. It depends. The best I can describe it is sort of a warmer sound, which is kind of a weird word to use, but it's a different sound. I don't think it's better. But there are, purists that insist it's better. Like, that's the only way to listen to this sort of band is on vinyl. Right. I'm not that much of an elitist hipster. as far as I'm a bit of a hipster, I collect vinyl, but as I've said, there's not much point because my record player doesn't have speakers, and records are so expensive. I've got too many other priorities to be. That's why I don't go to the record store, because I'm like, no, I can't spend $30-$40 on a record right now. Like, for that's just going to sit there. Spend the money somewhere else. But I mean, I love going. Love going to the record store. But of course, in this, we got characters playing records. They've got a little record thing, kind of reminiscent of my Fisher-Price one, although, of course, cooler. Because I don't know. It doesn't matter how old my Fisher-Price one is going to get. It's never going to be considered cool and retro. It's still Fisher-Price. You're not going to see that in a Wes Anderson film.
I mean, at the rate we're going, vinyl may be the only physical media we have left.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything gets released on vinyl now. When like stand-ups release their specials on vinyl, who's buying that?
The same people that are buying the other ones. I mean, yeah, I understand it again because it's cool because it's bigger and you got the artwork is big and you got big booklets and stuff. I mean, I get it all. And it's also for older people, too, that grew up listening that way. They listen to, like, I don't know, Bill Cosby or whatever on his albums.
I've got some Bill Cosby records.
Nice. And I think I've told you, actually, in this house, oddly enough, the way I used to listen to Annie, the musical Annie, and at least a couple others, we actually had 8 tracks for that. We had an 8-track player in our basement. And this is when we already had tapes. We had an 8-track player that had several things that I did listen to, and Annie was the main one. That's how I used to listen to Annie. There was at least a couple other musicals.
Tomorrow, what was that?
Yeah, that's on Annie. Tomorrow, I love you. Tomorrow, it's only a day away. The sun will come out tomorrow. But that's a good song. Dumb Dog, Why Are You Following Me? And of course, It's a Hard Knock Life. Which eventually got like shoved in some 90s rap song because so stupid.
Let's say Jay-Z may have done that.
Sounds about right. It's just a weird contrast hearing a bunch of like kids going, "It's a hard knock life for us," and then you hear like some smooth rapper voice coming in over it. I remember the start of the video because it has like an old black man going, "It's a hard knock life." And I mean, I get it. That's one of the ones where like white people and black people couldn't agree. We both use that term or something, it's that kind of thing, right? It's like, here's something that the white people said. But
yeah, it was Jay-Z.
I loved Annie. If I was a girl, I would have played her.
Yeah.
Because I love to sing too. And the Annie from 1982, I always forget her name. She was a wonderful singer. I don't know, Jamie. Have you seen? There's an animated Wizard of Oz from the early 80s, and it's easy to pick out because it's the only animated Wizard of Oz I've ever seen with a blonde Dorothy. And that girl does her voice, and it's full of songs. And it has this great song called "Wizard of a Day." That's really short, but it's a great song. What a great voice that kid had. And I mean, I'm one of the people, I don't like kids singing, right? Like, if they're just going to sing, I don't want to hear a kid's version. I want an adult. I'm not a fan of kids singing, but she was fantastic. I better look her up now.
So you're saying in Annie, the girl that played Annie wasn't doing the singing?
Well, I mean, the 1982 Annie, yeah. That's her.
Okay.
That's what I mean. And she played, and I said, and in this animated Wizard of Oz, she played Dorothy and did the singing too. I gotta look this up now. I remember her damn name. Eileen Quinn, who is 49 now. Holy shit.
Wow.
But really great talent. But she did the same year. So she did Annie in 82, and that Wizard of Oz is also from 82. And I don't really know anything else she did. But she had a few albums, including one from. She had an album in 82 and then nothing. And then she released an album in 2015 and in 2019. That's crazy. But Tomorrow from that soundtrack in 82 was released as a single and, charted really high. But anyway, I don't really listen to kids sing, but she was a great singer and a great talent. But yeah, I think you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. It was one of the ones that I think used to play on Family Channel, and I watched it a lot. It wasn't great or anything, but I liked it. definitely not the best one. If you want animated Oz, you want the Canadian dub of the anime Wizard of Oz, because that's really the one. They followed the book so closely because there were a bunch of episodes and they followed the books. They were great. That used to be on Netflix years ago, and the theme song was by Canadian band Parachute Club, or whatever the fuck their name is, which is an interesting song. They had a song called Rise Up that was a big hit, and it was shot on a day in the summer in Toronto. And that's like, if you want to know like what Canada was like in the 80s, that's like, that video is like sums everything up. It also, I think I've said this before, as somebody who was born in 83, so, you know, my recollections of the 80s are very hazy, a lot of it, because it's so long ago. But how I always remember the 80s in my head is kind of like one long summer, except there were some Christmases. And that's what that video Rise Up reminds me of. It's just sort of a bunch of people parading around in Toronto, banging on things and shouting and dancing. It's just a very joyful song. But I think they're called Parachute Club. But they did the theme song for that, which also came on Family Channel. But I'm sure it never came on the Disney Channel because it was a Japanese anime, but it was dubbed, I think, by Sinar, by Canadian voice actors and Canadian. It also had very, very primitive computer animation in the opening, like really blocky shit. Anyway, I think you can watch episodes of that on YouTube too. But to me, that might be one of the most definitive adaptations of Oz there is. It followed the books very closely. It's really cool. I was never into that one. And I know it has all the hallmarks for somebody like me, being like dark and all that, but it was never. And it's not that I wasn't into it. I don't think I knew it as a kid. I don't think I was a bit older by the time I knew that. But I mean, if we're going to talk musicals, I mean, my favorite thing in the world is like Les Mis, obviously. That original cast recording, although I like other recordings, but I just mean, I grew up with that. There was a good 2010 show, which was the 25th anniversary show, which comes on PBS sometimes. And that one had some names like one of the Jonas Brothers was Marius, and he was pretty good. But anyway, we'll swing back to the movie now. Just trying to think about what other movie. So, yeah, I think this is kind of like the first movie there where he really establishes like his style, like what his movies are all about. The first two had elements, but this is the one where, you know, he's shown like this really meticulously crafted world that's kind of like a magic realism thing. Like, you know, it's a real world, but it's got like a heightened sort of fantasy element to it. Although this movie's still quite grounded, but you would see more dreamlike stuff, particularly in other movies like Life Aquatic. But I always think of them. I'll probably watch Life Aquatic soon. Although again, I'm here, so I don't have it with me, but I'll watch it somewhere because I own that Blu-ray Criterion. Orc gave that to me, which was, I didn't ask him to do that. So thank you, Orc. It's amazing that I have such a great movie that you just sent to me. But
that's cool.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I know it exists, but I've never seen or heard any of it. Jamie, that one I know about it, but yeah. Well, I figured, yeah, that's what you meant because of your age. Because you saw Annie in theater, and I was not yet born.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of like his sort of establishing movie. Sort of establishes his style, and also really his sort of stable of actors. But yeah, I did not see the 2007 one. That's the one and I did not see Isle of Dogs. And he has a movie coming out in 2021 that was supposed to come out, I think, this year. Was one of the many movies that got delayed. And it looks great. I mean, listen to this freaking cast: Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Lea Seydoux, Frances McDermott, Timothy Chalamet, Jeffrey Wright, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson. And also features Liv Schreiber, Edward Norton, Willem Dafoe, Saoirse Ronan, Jason Schwartzman, and of course Angelica Houston. But I've already seen some of the early previews for it. It looks really cool.
Yeah, got a lot of his stable actors in there.
I think it's set during the German occupation of France in World War II. I think it's about like underground resistance people and stuff. I think, and it looks really cool. But yeah, there was something that was said in that interview I was reading parts of to you that talks about that 2007 movie. I can't pronounce it, Darjeeling or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And it sounds really cool. There's this whole sequence with the train, because apparently like the interviewer was absolutely floored because he thought they were like using effects and stuff, but apparently they were really like moving the camera from car to car, because there are a couple times where stuff is the physics don't make sense, because he likes to open things up, right? Move like, he'll show you what the house looks like here, cut open, and he does the same thing with the boat in Steve Zissou. And I just love that stuff. Let me tell you about my boat. Oh yeah, the Grand Budapest Hotel. So I saw Life Aquatic, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest Hotel in theaters. Don't know why I missed Isle of Dogs. Don't even think I was aware of Darjeeling Limited.
I think that's the one Owen Wilson was working on when he had his suicide attempts.
Yeah. It's funny how this movie shows like him as like sort of a deeply troubled character, kind of going down that path in a way. Although, I mean, quite different, but I mean, still. But yeah, that's one of the ones where like where Jason Schwartzman's one of the main characters. And that movie was co-written with Roman Coppola, who is Francis Ford Coppola's son. And if we forgot to say it at the start, Owen Wilson co-wrote this movie. He co-wrote Royal Tenenbaums with Anderson. I always wonder about stuff like that. Like, does that mean he always meant to play Cash, or did he envision himself as somebody else first? And I don't know. He probably did always mean to play Cash. It just seems so tailor-made for him. He's always, so well, we do have some characters playing against type, but he's not. He's kind of like a showy, guy. I mean, he's this guy who's New York born and bred. And even though it says he lived across the street with his aunt and probably didn't have much money, he still was associated with them. So, and yet, he's got this image of sort of like a rugged frontiersman type writer. He's always got cowboy hats on, and all his writing seems to be about that, even though he's a guy that was born and raised in New York City.
Yeah, it almost seems like it would be too on the nose to have them playing brothers in this film.
I think so.
Because, I mean, they've done that before. I think they were brothers in Bottle Rocket.
Yes, they were. Owen Wilson seems almost unrecognizable to me in Bottle Rocket. He's so different, with his hair so short.
Yeah.
Because even in a movie older than that, where he just has a cameo, like he has a really short, I don't think really cameo because nobody always is, but he has this short bit in The Cable Guy where he's the guy that Jim Carrey like attacks in the bathroom. And that's 96. Which is that the same year as Bottle Rocket? Was Bottle Rocket 96? Anyway, he has more of his like normal sort of like look in that his hair is like long and wavy.
96.
Yeah, so same year, because I know for a fact that Cable Guy was 96. Anyway, it's just nice to talk about some of the technical aspects of the film, the way the camera's used, and the music and things like that, because we just came off, 2 shows where it was all really about sort of the psychology of the characters when we did Persona and Dead Ringers. So we kind of wanted to go, more bright and colorful direction. So Wes Anderson seemed like a good option after Metropolis fell off. Although hopefully we can do Metropolis at some point in the future. We'll see how that goes.
I think we may have next week tied down. If you want to announce that now.
Oh right, yeah. Let me think for a second. I need to remember. Well, oh right, yeah. So we were also thinking about. Been a while since we've done like an Asian movie. We always do one of those every once in a while. And kind of a unique one is this one that I saw years ago at my friend's apartment. It's the same friend that I had that, introduced me to all the weird movies and stuff. And this was this was just before he left, I think. It's one of the last movies I ever watched with him, but it was quite a few years ago still because he rented it. And it's a Korean movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. which is like sort of an adventure movie set in like 1930s Manchuria, which is kind of like its own Wild West thing in the Far East. And it's just like sort of a crazy stylized adventure film that I haven't seen in a long time. But yeah,
it's wild. It's a wild film.
But it's a lot of fun. So there's a good chance that we're doing that next week. So if that changes, we'll let you know. But for now, that is the plan, to do The Good, the Bad, and the World. Oh, who's the director of that?
Ji-woon.
All right. I know I've seen something else he did.
He's done a lot of stuff I've seen. Oh, I Saw the Devil. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I Saw the Devil.
Bittersweet Life. Doomsday Book. Tale of Two Sisters.
I've seen The Tale of Two Sisters, too, yeah. I'm right? Yeah, Manchuria. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 1939 Manchuria, which was a pretty crazy time and place. But it's a very sort of stylish kind of action thing. It's an Eastern Western, as you might want to say. And
yeah.
But it's also sort of like a World War II pulp movie because it's set during that era. Of course, 1939, yeah, that was a really chaotic time for that area. The second Sino-Japanese War was going on, which would eventually be absorbed into the larger conflict that was World War II. So anyway, yeah, that should be a lot of fun. I haven't seen it in quite a while. I remember the broad strokes, but I forget a lot of it. I just know it's about like, some like wandering loner. He gets caught up in things and like there's assassins and stuff and trains and all sorts of craziness. So yeah, that is the plan. Hopefully that plan will stay intact. Circle back just to finish up because we're past 2.5 hours and we don't want to drag this out. The Royal Tenenbaums. I know, something should be said about the music. As we said, the music is so meticulously selected. Of course, we talked about the intro with Hey Jude and how it works really well for a montage scene that actually spans years because of sort of the timelessness of a song like that. It's also the first use in a movie or TV show of outside of its original source that I'm aware of is stuff from the Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack. In that the two different versions of Christmas Time is here is played in this thing. Originally, because there's the instrumental one, which is the long one, and then there's the short one, which has the vocals, which is just the kids, going, "Christmas time is here," when that's played when he's at the ice cream parlor with Margot. And what's funny is I always thought Arrested Development was kind of almost like a spiritual successor to this movie in a way. It was about like an eccentric rich family and some of their troubles, but obviously more goofy and things like that. And that show used that a lot. They would often use that song. They would often use that song to like express a character being depressed. Sometimes if they were showing like somebody depressed, they'd be like shuffling around looking at their feet and that would be playing. But yeah, so I really appreciate that too because I've always been a big fan of that. Probably if I do make anything on my channel for Christmas, I don't know if I'll be able to or not, but I'll use it. But if people are wondering, I did do a Christmas video like 9 years ago or something crazy where I read "Yes, Virginia, There is a Santa Claus," and I use that as my background music. So you might be able to hunt that down. I don't know. I'll probably around Christmas post it on Twitter if anybody gives a damn, but I'd like to do a new little Christmas video. I want to get my channel going again since I have a new camera.
Yeah.
So it's a bit harder to do while I'm here, but hopefully when I'm back in January, I can start doing some stuff for the channel. My own channel. This channel, of course, will keep going. But thinking of the other music. Yeah, most of the other music was sort of like classic rock stuff from the 60s and 70s, as you might expect, but not like the typical radio classic rock. More deep cuts and always very thoughtful. We talked about Elliott Smith for the most depressing and dark part of the movie. That makes perfect sense. I like the hopefulness of the Van Morrison track at the end. I mean, they're coming off a funeral and he's dead, but the redemption has been achieved in the movie, even though he didn't get to live much longer than that. The family, and Chaz, ironically, is the one who winds up closest to him, right? He and Chaz really finally bond, something they could never even do when he was a kid, and he's the one who's with him when he dies. So people always like a redemption story, and if you want to get really vague, we can compare it to like a Christmas classic, like A Christmas Carol, which is maybe the ultimate story of a man who lived most of his life as a selfish prick and in the end redeemed himself. And I'm sure in the next few weeks I'll start watching various versions of that. So I'll tell people later what I think I'll rank maybe the versions or something, because I have very specific opinions on adaptations of A Christmas Carol. The Muppet Christmas Carol is very good. Michael Caine. It's Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge.
I've been considered an asshole for most of my life. I don't think of you as an asshole. You're more of a son of a bitch.
Is that what Sherman said to him?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing. Because he's like, I mean, and there's just some realness to that too. Because there's a part where he says like, he acknowledges the pain he's caused Chaz, and he says, "But are you ready to forgive me?" And he's just like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because you're hurting me now, and I want to move on." Because sometimes that's all there is to do in life. I'm not saying everything is forgivable. Lots of things happen, and I would never hold it against people if they decide. But I mean, I think most of us, from a lot of situations, we just have to learn to forgive.
That is true. I've learned that. That's one of the big lessons I've learned getting older.
Right. And I think it's more about even you than them. Because I think sometimes you can forgive somebody, and it's not because they deserve it. They don't even deserve it. But it's better for you. It's more healthy if you can forgive them.
I mean, I have grudges with people from preschool, you know? Like, I'm a guy that holds grudges, and I got to stop doing that because, life's too short, man.
Yeah, what's to be gained? That's very true. I guess I was always pretty good at like letting go of anger. Like, it's funny. I'm one of those people that burns hot, but it dissipates quickly. Like, I can get really mad or upset in a moment, but it doesn't take very long for me to like think rationally and cool down. I feel bad because the people that have been on the end of that the most is probably my parents, and God, they don't deserve it. But so many times I've like blown up at my parents, and then only even a couple of hours later, I realized that it was, the complete wrong thing to do, even if I had a point, So that's something I have to get better at, I guess, I suppose, because I am good at forgiveness and reflection, but sometimes in the moment, and I mean, most people are like that probably, anytime it's hard to control yourself in a moment, if something's really emotional. But it's not anything I relate to on that personal level. Everybody can relate a little bit, but it's a really feel-good movie for me. It's one of the few movies that I don't necessarily have to relate too strongly to the characters or the situations or anything to still get a real emotional feel for the movie. Like, really feel for the characters and feel their emotions, their sadness and their happiness. I really feel great about his redemption. And the final joke too, right? Because earlier in the movie, when he's looking in the graveyard, he sees one about a guy that drowned in the Caspian Sea or something. He's like, "Wow, I'd like to have that." So in the end, they say, "What is it?" They say like he drowned, like trying to save his family from like a destroyed battleship or something, which is pretty funny.
And it had the similar massive headstone.
Yeah. And of course, he had some earlier lines about his thoughtlessness and the way he dealt with his children, even when they're adults, right? Because at first, like he's saying, "I want to take you guys out to your grandmother's grave," and then he's reminded that Margot was never invited. He's like, "Well, she wasn't your real grandmother. I don't know how interested you would be," which is weird because I think most people who adopt kids, the grandparents would be all on board for it and they'd care. But anyway, she said, "Well, you're invited now." But then the other thing is. But then Richie says, it's funny because to make the point, I'm actually going to make the same mistake, and that I can't remember the name of Chaz's wife, but she says she's buried there too. And he goes, "Who?" And Chaz goes, "My wife." And then he goes, "Oh yeah, we'll have to swing by her grave too." And then,
that's right, there's two bodies out here.
And then he makes it even worse. But yeah, we got another body buried out here. Like, talk about like framing thing in saying something in the absolute worst way, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with what he's saying, but sometimes there's such a thing as tact in how you say things, right? And that's one of the really cool things about his characters. Like, he's always phrasing things in the worst way, which makes him come off as even more of an asshole than he means to be sometimes. And I think we talked about some of his little subtle kind of racist jibes at poor Henry. Because at one point he's just like, "Look at that black bastard. Look at that grizzly bear," or something like that. And then when he's talking, he's like, "Let's talk jive. I can talk jive." And he's like, "Did you?" And he calls him Coltrane. He's like, "You call me Coltrane?" He's like, "No." He's like, "But if I did, you wouldn't be able to do anything about it." Yeah.
What do you think about that big black buck moving in?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah, his dialogue's so good. Pretty much everybody's dialogue is good.
It is, yeah.
Again, why the movie works, which is Sometimes why it's funny because even though this is more grounded in reality than some of the others, sometimes the dialogue, you know, you can still have a scene where characters, what they're saying to each other is sort of absurd, but it's just funny. It's just entertaining. But anyway, more stuff will probably occur to me later because this is one of my absolute favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies of the 21st century. I think probably, I guess I would have to say that Wes Anderson might be one of the better filmmakers of the 21st century, although I know he started earlier. But, you know, if I was going to make like a top 10 directors list of the 21st century, he's on it.
Absolutely. I'd like to do. We got to do Life Aquatic.
We might as well, because Life Aquatic is one of my absolute favorites. I love this movie. I love Life Aquatic even more. It's my favorite Bill Murray thing. I just adore it. That's one of those movies I wish I could live inside. I've talked about this before. Like the world that's created, I want to live in that world. It's so great. I feel like everything that was good about this movie is like magnified in Life Aquatic. And Life Aquatic, of course, is a little goofier and sillier. It's got like an adventure going on. And I don't know. I think it's the movie that just most perfectly takes advantage. After so many years of like Bill Murray maybe not making the best choices and roles and stuff, like that movie just perfectly celebrates everything that's cool about him. I love it to death. I know most people will remember Bill Murray fondly for, I don't know, earlier stuff, especially like a Ghostbusters or even Meatball or something like that. And I think those are good and they're funny. But for me, it's definitely Life Aquatic. And I've also gone back and forth of whether or not it's worth we could actually get a good show out of like Lost in Translation. Speaking of Bill Murray and his renaissance, like that was a couple years after this. Like this movie, I think, really got him on the footing that would lead him into something like Lost in Translation, which was an absolute darling at the time. It's one of those movies where I think it's faded a little bit. It was so adored in the moment. People just loved it and never shut up about it. I think that's faded a bit. I think some people have tempered their feelings on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's one that's worth doing or not, but it's one I've thought about a lot about whether or not it would be worth doing at some point. Because it is a good movie, and I do like, and I do, of course, I'm a huge Bill Murray fan. But anyway, so that's Royal Tenenbaums, 2001. As I said, this is a movie I love so much that I know when this show is over, more stuff's going to occur to me. I'm like, oh, we should have talked about that, but I think we did. We did cover a lot of things. We went through each of the characters. We tried our best to talk about, you know, the camera techniques and the aesthetic and all the retro stuff and the music. There's always more to say, but this is one that Jay and I both really like. So it was a lot of fun to do, and yeah, I felt it was a good choice for this time after we'd done two kind of really serious, heavy psychological movies that we also enjoy. But you know, it's nice to shift in tone every once in a while. And we're going to shift again and maybe have sort of a fun, wacky Korean adventure movie next time. So stay tuned for that. So thanks so much for watching. Anybody that was watching live, or if you're watching this at a later date, that's cool too. And that'll do it.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
See you next time. Peace out.